moved to New Hampshire.
And moved to New Hampshire. Damn it. That's all we got for you tonight. 3 hours of radio, and I'll be back another one of these weekends, and we're on every Saturday and Sunday. Thanks for calling. Thanks for listening. Free Talk Live.
When you're coping with bad news and the news media come calling, and they will, don't clam up. As notorious political figures find out the hard way, the cover-up can be worse than the crime. So get out in front of unfavorable news about your company, your group, or organization, or yourself. The sooner you confront a negative story, the sooner it will be over. Responding as quickly to negative stories as you do to positive ones enhances your credibility. Hiding embarrassing information or lying will do more damage than damage control. Never stonewall. Tell your side of the story, use specifics, and detail what corrective action has already been taken. Respond in kind. If the issue is emotional, don't sound like a cold, unemotional Mr. Spock. For more tips on critical communication skills for the way things are now, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com. Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
You're 6 minutes away from a live episode of Free Talk Live. Listen live at freetalklive.com.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer with a look back at some of the week's top stories. Hundreds of people were killed in Israeli airstrikes in Gaza after the collapse of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Tel Aviv says it's carrying out the strikes because Hamas rejected proposals to extend the ceasefire agreement. Hamas called the attacks a blatant violation of all international and humanitarian conventions. FSN's Giles Gibson has more from Tel Aviv.
The Israeli military has carried out some airstrikes inside Gaza since the expiry of the first phase of the ceasefire agreement. But really these strikes that started in the early hours of Tuesday local time were on a completely different scale. International aid workers have described being woken up by loud explosions which shook the buildings that they were in. And then as dawn broke, hundreds of people started turning up at hospitals inside Gaza, the remaining healthcare facilities inside the enclave. There are lots of photos and videos circulating of large crowds outside the entrances to those hospitals. And we've also heard from the Palestinian Red Crescent saying that hospitals inside Gaza are overwhelmed.
U.S. President Donald Trump says his call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was very good and that peace talks are on track. The pair spoke a day after Trump talked with Russian President Vladimir Putin, who said he would be willing to pause attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Within hours of that call, both sides launched fresh strikes, accusing each other of targeting oil facilities and power plants. FSN's Kate Fisher reports from Washington.
Donald Trump taking a very different tone than after the last time these two leaders spoke, which was, of course, during that angry Oval Office meeting here in Washington last month. On his Truth social media platform, Donald Trump saying that most of the conversation was based on the call he had with Vladimir Putin yesterday in order to align both Russia and Ukraine in terms of their requests and needs. And he said, we are very much on track. So certainly Donald Trump suggesting that things are still going well, despite the fact that Volodymyr Zelensky was concerned after the readouts from that call between Putin and Trump yesterday.
The World Meteorological Organization confirmed 2024 as the hottest year on record in 175 years. FSN's Jody Jacobs has more.
Glaciers and sea ice are rapidly melting, contributing to a rise in global sea levels. The number of tropical cyclones, floods, droughts are also increasing in number and size. These worrying trends are all contained in the latest UN report on global climate, and which the WMO says is contributing to worsening food crises and fueling massive economic losses. The World Meteorological Organization says the report's findings are a wake-up call, and that the record-breaking global temperatures in 2024 were primarily driven by increasing greenhouse gas emissions. And projections suggest these temperatures could just get worse if the world isn't able to significantly reduce emissions. Jody Jacobs, New York.
U.S. President Trump signed an executive order on Thursday fulfilling a campaign pledge to dismantle the nation's Department of Education. President Trump will need help from Congress to make that a reality, but he has already taken steps to reduce its authority and has cut much of its workforce. FSN's Mitch McCann reports.
Despite polling showing that dismantling the Department of Education is an unpopular move, it remains a key campaign pledge Mr. Trump hopes to act on as he plans to give more power to state governments. According to USA Today, Mr. Trump's executive order will also call for the uninterrupted delivery of services, programs and benefits on which Americans rely. The idea of closing the department isn't new for Republicans, with efforts to close it dating back to the 1980s. However, the push has gained steam in recent years due to what many in the party view as progressive agendas being taught to children. 50 million school kids attend public school in the US. While the majority of their funding comes from states and municipalities, the federal government accounts for around 10% of total school funding. Mitch McCann, New York.
London's Heathrow Airport was closed all day on Friday after a fire at a nearby electricity substation that provides it with power. Heathrow is Europe's busiest airport, and hundreds of thousands of passengers have been affected, with disruption set to continue for days to come. Those are some of the top stories from the past week. Ira Spitzer.
Federal authorities are currently on high alert in Washington, D.C. following reports that hundreds of crazed sociopaths infiltrated the congressional chambers this morning. Mary Canley, a Capitol employee who managed to escape the House chambers, described the troubling scene to reporters.
I saw all of them. About 400 to 500 completely deranged people just rambling on about guns, the military, and money.
Investigators say the lunatics, many of whom are believed to suffer from severe personality disorders, have locked themselves in the chambers for hours now, with no clear purpose or reasoning.
I looked at one of them right in the eyes, and it was like he was empty on the inside, devoid of any emotion or feeling. It was horrifying. It's only a matter of time before they do something that really hurts someone.
We believe these men to be manipulative and extremely dangerous. Luckily, they are also very disorganized, and there is a chance they may never be able to ever take any action at all. For more on this developing story, keep checking theonion.com.
This is the Onion News Network.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
This is Free Talk Live. It's talk radio you control. The phone number here is 603-283-6160. Give us a call. Let us know what you're thinking about tonight. In the studio, it's Stu.
And Richie Rich.
And tonight, we've got some things that we brought in. We hope you'll give us a call so that we can have a chat with you as the listener. And I wanted to start out with one from The Guardian.
Reputable news source.
I suppose. This is the headlines: Greenpeace must pay at least $660 million over Dakota pipeline protests.
I saw that. Yeah. Reputable. I would say this: reputable news source might be original shtick. I don't know if I got that from any place specifically, aside from just people using it, like, oh, is this a reputable news source? When libertarians will give references like, oh, check this out, like go to InfoWars, like, oh, that site's a bunch of BS, you can't tell any, like, well, so this is a reputable news source.
Reputable news source.
That might be original shtick from me. And if I'm wrong and you know where I stole that from, then please do give us a call, because I don't recall then.
If anybody has ever heard the origin of the quote,
reputable news source.
Reputable news source.
As used in context by me, right? Like, again, it's a thing, whether or not this is a reputable news source, but using it as shtick, right? I think that's an original. That's a Richie Rich original.
This nonprofit, which will appeal the decision, says lawsuits like this are aimed at destroying the right to peaceful protest. And that may be so. A jury in North Dakota has decided that the environmental group Greenpeace must pay hundreds of millions of dollars to the pipeline company Energy Transfer and is liable for defamation and other claims over protests in the state nearly a decade ago. Energy Transfer Partners, a Dallas-based oil and gas company worth almost $70 billion, has sued Greenpeace, alleging defamation and orchestrating criminal behavior by protesters at the Dakota Access Pipeline in 2016 and 17.
Okay, pause there. Can we separate those two things?
Let me finish the sentence.
Okay.
Claiming the organization incited people to protest by using misinformation campaign.
Right, okay, but there's two distinct things, right? There's the defamation, and then there's the criminal activity.
Yep.
Now, feel free to argue with me on this, because I don't really care either way, but like within libertarian thought, defamation may not be a non-aggression principle violation, right? Like, you should be able to say what you want about whoever you want, and if it's bad information or misinformation or slander or libel or any of those things, there's no way to connect that to direct economic harm. You can just combat it with truthful information and drown out the misinformation, right? Like, I've heard the case from both sides, so I don't want to argue a specific side. And then there's like the criminal activity of trespassing onto the oil fields or on the pipeline and doing direct damage to the pipeline while they're trying to work on it, or standing in front of, the bulldozer trying to bulldoze the tree down, right? When it's not your property, not your land, right? Those are two distinct things. And if one leads to the other, well, then you can criminalize the criminal behavior, which is, it's already criminalized. You just act on that. But
Right.
you have to allow the speech and the opinions of people to go out. So if Greenpeace said, like, this oil company is bad and something should be done, and protesters then go out and, like I said, block the path or, damage the pipeline, well, then they should be held individually liable for the damage they caused.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I come down on all of that pretty much exactly like you do. I think defamation in some rare cases can be a thing. It should be extremely hard to prove.
Well, and there has to be economic damage, right? Like if I say, like, Stu's a bad guy, and then you get fired, well, were you fired because I said it? Were you fired for something else?
Economic damage, or you got lynched or something, like you got to be able to show some real harm,
right,
from the lies that were spread about you.
And it's not your job to hold, right? Your employer makes that decision, and he can base it on whatever he wants in a free society.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that he, and it happens a lot, right? That especially amongst athletes in professional sports, a lot of times, right? Like the accusation comes down of like sexual misconduct.
Yeah.
And they're like, bam, you're fined, you're suspended, you're off the team, you're out of the league. And if it comes out that was misinformation, right, then you're back.
Yeah.
Right. So, their companies are quick to act on that sort of information, whether it's bad information or not. But can you say, can you attribute that? Or is there some harm that was done that's the lying party's fault?
Right. And that as far as damages to people, this is one of the things that would fall into the realm of easier to fix than some other things.
Sure.
So probably not that big of a deal.
Or the Duke Lacrosse boys.
And kind of like trespass, usually not that big of a deal. You were just in the wrong place.
Usually.
For a certain amount of time.
Okay, so let's talk about this real quick, because I was thinking about this a few weeks ago. Trespass is another weird one. Let me give the example. Like someone cuts the corner of your yard.
Yeah.
Right. It's easier, it's a shortcut or whatever. And they just cut through.
Yep.
And no big deal. Not a lot of harm done.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But then, dozens of people start to take the same shortcut.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden a path starts to form through your yard.
I think one of the Metallica guys had this problem.
Okay.
And he put up a wall and everybody called him a jerk for it.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's a solution, right?
Yeah, right.
But who's responsible for the damage? It's not one individual trespasser, right? It's like the collective use of multiple trespassers.
But to me, that's just a case of that's your property and you got to put a wall up if you don't want people walking through there.
Understood. I understand the solution, but like someone's responsible for the damage caused, and it's not you, right? It's not like, well, you didn't put up a wall, so like it's your fault. And like, no, people trespassed and caused damage.
Yeah. I don't know how you would get, repayment out of that one, but
it's a tricky one.
But you're right, there's some damage to point at there. Going on with the story, Greenpeace has denied the claims, said in a statement after the verdict that lawsuits like this were aimed at destroying the right to peaceful protest. Constitutional rights experts had expressed fears that the case could have a wider chilling effect on free speech. The 9-person jury in Mandan, North Dakota found in favor of Energy Transfer on most counts after more than 2 days of deliberations. It awarded Energy Transfer at least $660 million, according to calculations from Greenpeace. The environmental group, which had expressed concerns before the trial about getting a fair hearing in oil and gas country, said that a loss and an enormous financial award could bankrupt their U.S. operation.
A fair concern, right?
Yeah.
If you're filing the lawsuit in Texas, where that's a big industry.
Right, and that's a big operation. You put a lot of stuff in place to make it happen, and then if it doesn't happen, that's going to hurt. So, Energy Transfer sued 3 Greenpeace entities, claiming that they are a single organization rather than independent members of the Greenpeace network. I'm sure this could go on for a while, but the point here is really that if it kind of does seem like this is aimed at
creating a chilling effect for protesters, or
that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, because and I remember at the time that this was going on, it was a gigantic thing in the news. It was and I don't remember exactly all the specifics of it, but the people that lived in that area really didn't want this thing.
Yeah,
and were well within their rights to say so.
Well within the rights to say so, but again, from the libertarian perspective, we're all about property rights, right? And so who owned the land? And if the Texas Oil Company owned the land, then you don't get to tell them what they can or cannot do. Like that just doesn't happen.
But what if what I do with my neighboring property is going to destroy yours, then there's
then you have a tort.
There's a situation there, right?
Yeah. Right. Then you sue for damages.
But can't you? But are you powerless to do anything before the damage occurs? You can say, I see this guy setting up to destroy my land. Can we stop this before it happens, or do I got to wait and file a tort later?
You would file an injunction.
Right.
You can go to the court and file an injunction. Like I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility absent the state court system, right? You go to the court, you say, hey, I see some potential for damage here.
Right.
Before the damage occurs, can we discuss this?
Yeah, and I guess those are some of the specifics I don't remember at this,
Yeah. Well, regardless of it's a hypothetical. Like what could be done if your neighbor is threatening to damage your land, or you believe that their actions are going to do damage and you want to prevent it. Yeah. Right. Like, there's a way to do it. I used to work for a storage facility, and I had an unruly customer who had like an RV on the property, and they were like chronically delinquent on payment. So I was always like threatening to like auction the RV off. That was like, the last ditch ever, like either pay or it goes to auction. And 1 month they did that. They went to the court and they filed an injunction, said like, hey, we're just going to be late on payment again. Don't allow him to auction off my RV. And so I couldn't auction it off for like 6 months, and then had to go to court on behalf of the company. They never showed up. They eventually paid the bill and got it towed off the property. So it wasn't an issue, but like that's that's within the current paradigm of existence, and I don't think that would be absent in a stateless society, right? Like, there's going to be damage. We want to prevent the damage from occurring. Someone stop this from happening, and you would go, send a strongly worded letter to the company first, like, hey, I think you're going to damage my property. Please don't do this. And they say, screw off. It's our land. We're going to do what we want.
Yeah.
And then you go to the arbiter and you say, hey, I think they're going to do damage. Bring them in. And if they refuse arbitration, well, then they're outlaws and all bets are off, right?
Right. Which is essentially what we have, except that the arbitration has been monopolized and they're on the side of the big monster company.
Right.
They're on the side of whoever has more money.
Because they can pay the state system. But the theory would be that you wouldn't see that in an open arbitration system, because there'd be multiple arbiters, and one that was found to be in collusion and corrupt, right, would not get much more business aside from their corrupt cronies. And even that wouldn't help, right? Because you could go elsewhere, right, and they would fall out of favor very quickly and lose that corruption money, because no one else is using their service, knowing that if you go with them, you're going to lose to the big guys who's paying them off.
That's right. Competitive markets
solve these problems.
They certainly do. They give you the incentive to protect your reputation.
I'm downriver from a big factory that's being built, and I think they're going to pollute it, right?
Yeah.
Sue them in advance after the strongly worded letter to get them to cease, or if they refuse, then sue them once the damage is done and sue them for more, because, hey, you have a record of your attempts to prevent this from happening in the first place, and that needs to be taken into account.
Right, but in this case, we have the company suing the people who said they didn't want it.
Well,
and sure, I guess, I don't know, they got a little rowdy. They didn't hurt anybody.
That's part of the problem, though. That's the property rights violation. Greenpeace can talk all the smack they want, right? But it's the individual protesters who went and trespassed or damaged the company property that I would have a problem with.
Yeah, and this is where the property rights arguments get a little bit hairy, in my opinion, because they don't take into account sometimes when what's when what's right is what's right emotionally might be wrong logically.
Yeah.
And when you run
like
up
spraying a Nazi emblem on a swastika on a Tesla.
Exactly. Or like what's the one that libertarians like to use, shooting the girl for trampling on your daisies.
Yeah.
Right. So that and so
that seems wrong emotionally too. That's another like minor trespass.
Well, right. That's the breakdown of it. It's when something is wrong, something doesn't add up emotionally. You just know it's wrong to do.
Yeah.
But logically, if you're only looking at the bottom line, dollar, then it does make sense to do.
Well, I'm going to say probably in the case with the pipeline, but not with the girl shooting the daisies. Right? The girl picks your daisy and you shoot her. You're opening up yourself to a lot more financial incursion by everything, all the law, all the arbitration that follows.
Right, and that's why it's the extreme example. So that when people really want to,
and the likelihood is no arbiter is going to find you in the right for shooting a girl, even though she was trespassing. Right, the rational, logical response is to prevent the trespass, or to file your own tortious claim against her and her family for damages for the one daisy.
Right,
and even small claims court has like the lower limit on how much damage needs to be done before they will even take that into consideration. And if you're going like, oh, this little girl owes me $1, I'm taking you to court, you're going to be liable for all the court costs.
Right.
Well, then you'd probably either just give the dude $1 or assume that you're going to win, and he'll end up paying all the court costs on your end too. Like it's the cost is a risk at the lower echelon of what we're talking about for financial damage.
That's right. And I've never heard a successful defense of the argument for shooting the little girl. I've just heard it as, a hypothetical that people will use as a debate topic.
Yes.
Like how far do property rights go? And it turns out if you're just sticking with property rights, they go pretty far sometimes.
Yeah.
And everybody draws that line of where it becomes wrong emotionally somewhere differently.
Well, and again, for me, I don't want to take the discussion in this direction, But, I use the concept of rights for conversation. I don't necessarily believe in the rights. So if you're defending your property against the girl stealing the daisies and you get away with it, the likelihood is someone's going to end your life, right? Someone is going to, take that to the next level because you're too much of a danger to stay alive, right? If you're like, oh, anyone who steps, everyone trips and falls onto my lawn is like open season, right? You're going to die, and I don't think it's worth putting your life on the line, right? Because whoever takes you out is likely not going to be found guilty in any court of arbitration because your initial action was so egregious, ending you seems justified as well. So it's always a cost-benefit analysis, and shooting the daisy chick doesn't seem worth it in any rational or emotional realm.
No, it doesn't seem right to me either.
But much like walking a path, you put up a fence, make it an electric fence. I don't care. Make the electric fence like 3 feet into your property, so they really have to make an effort to hit it in any realm or reason.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think that when you're looking at the property right argument versus people will say I shouldn't have to put up a wall, but emotionally it's not. If you're being reasonable, if you're balancing emotion and logic, then it's pretty easy to see that it's not that hard to just block off that path so that people aren't trespassing anymore.
And if you're running a pipeline next to your neighbor's property, as in the case with this oil company, and their claim is that you're going to do damage, well, fine, right? Let's hash this out ahead of time. But the people making the claim that there's potential damage, right, will also be on the hook for any economic loss you sustain while hashing it out, right? If that sets the project back a year, and that's a year of lost revenue, well, and you're in the right, well, then they're on the hook, man, because they're preventing you from getting ahead. So just don't do it.
Yeah. Yep. Just don't do it.
If it's not yours, don't do it. And if you think that there's going to be some future damage, file it ahead of time. Get the injunction, and then be held responsible if you're wrong.
That's right. I have another story about free speech that I'd like to get into.
Fire away. I'm fired up.
This is, the U.S. is poised to use terror laws against students.
Is this the Columbia
This could
University?
be worse than McCarthyism.
Okay.
This is also comes from The Guardian.
Reputable news source.
On Monday, the Department of Justice announced the launch of a Joint Task Force October 7, JTF 10-7. That's what they're calling it. In an accompanying
very bureaucratic.
In an accompanying press release, the DOJ said it would bring to justice Hamas leaders who murdered and kidnapped innocent civilians in the deadly attack on Israel of 7th of October 2023. Few would quarrel with this ambition. In the same breath, however...
Poorly worded article.
The press release claimed that the task force would also investigate acts of terrorism and civil rights violations by individuals and entities providing support and financing to Hamas related to Iran proxies and their affiliates, as well as acts of anti-Semitism by these groups.
Okay, well, that's a loaded one.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, the financial support, supporting terrorism or whatever, that's probably easily provable, but just about anything you say is being misconstrued as anti-Semitism at the moment when it comes to Hamas and the whole Palestine conflict with Israel.
It does seem that way, or like we're certainly headed there if it's not there yet.
I really wish the Israelis would stop murdering Palestinian women and children. What are you, an anti-Semite? You hate Jews? No, what did I say? Right. So I really wish the Israeli Defense Force would stop murdering Palestinian women and children.
That's right.
I guess I'm an anti-Semite then.
That's basically where it's going. Yes, you can't.
That's where it is. You're right.
You could even say, I don't think I don't think Benjamin Netanyahu is a good leader of a country, and that's anti-Semitic somehow.
Yeah. I seen a video. I don't know how germane this is to the conversation, but it was a video with like all the current and past leaders of Israel and their real names. And apparently, like, most of them have taken on a more Jewish sounding name because they're actually Eastern European Ashkenazi Jews, not Semitic Jews local to that region.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, nobody is going. If you go back not that far,
sure,
couple few hundred years, there's no Jewish state there at all.
Understood, but I mean, again, I don't want to like take this too far, but they're all from a region and then moved to that area, right, to occupy and to take it over and to kick out the Palestinians who were more local and who actually are Semitic to the region, and then they changed their name to like sound more Arab.
Huh, that's funny. I hadn't heard that one. What do you think about Jews moving to Israel and changing their name to make themselves sound more Jewish? Give us a call. Are we anti-Semitic the way we're talking here? I don't know. I don't think so, but I'm sure if you ask the ADL, they'll say differently. This is Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live. Oh, if only everyone were to behave in the way I think they should behave, humanity would be better off. Again, it's just trying to impose one's vision on others. You can't be humane to others by being inhumane in the first place. And by forcing them to behave or do things that you want them to do or think in the way that you want them to think, that's inhumane. You're not respecting their choices as a free, sovereign individual. And that's what liberty is all about. You respect the rights of others to live their lives, even in self-destructive ways that you think are a bad choice, so that in turn, you have the right to live your life in any way that you choose. That's what it's all about. And as soon as you violate that, as soon as you take a step into the world of initiating force on others, then anything's game. You validated that it's okay to use force to get your way as far as changing other people's behavior.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern at freetalklive.com.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer with a look back at some of the week's top stories. Hundreds of people were killed in Israeli airstrikes in Gaza after the collapse of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Tel Aviv says it's carrying out the strikes because Hamas rejected proposals to extend the ceasefire agreement. Hamas called the attacks a blatant violation of all international and humanitarian conventions. FSN's Giles Gibson has more from Tel Aviv.
The Israeli military has carried out some airstrikes inside Gaza since the expiry of the first phase of the ceasefire agreement. But really, these strikes that started in the early hours of Tuesday local time were on a completely different scale. International aid workers have described being woken up by loud explosions which shook the buildings that they were in. And then as dawn broke, hundreds of people started turning up at hospitals inside Gaza, the remaining healthcare facilities inside the enclave. There are lots of photos and videos circulating of large crowds outside the entrances to those hospitals. And we've also heard from the Palestinian Red Crescent saying that hospitals inside Gaza are overwhelmed.
U.S. President Donald Trump says his call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was very good and that peace talks are on track. The pair spoke a day after Trump talked with Russian President Vladimir Putin, who said he would be willing to pause attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Within hours of that call, both sides launched fresh strikes, accusing each other of targeting oil facilities and power plants. FSN's Kate Fisher reports from Washington.
Donald Trump taking a very different tone than after the last time these two leaders spoke, which was, of course, during that angry Oval Office meeting here in Washington last month. Donald Trump saying that most of the conversation was based on the call he had with Vladimir Putin yesterday in order to align both Russia and Ukraine in terms of their requests and needs. And he said, we are very much on track. So certainly Donald Trump suggesting that things are still going well, despite the fact that Volodymyr Zelensky was concerned after the readouts from that call between Putin and Trump.
London's Heathrow Airport was closed all day on Friday after a fire at a nearby electricity substation that provides it with power. Heathrow is Europe's busiest airport, and hundreds of thousands of passengers have been affected, with disruption set to continue for days to come. And the World Meteorological Organization released its latest State of the Global Climate on Wednesday, confirming that 2024 was the hottest year on record in 175 years. From Bureaus Worldwide,
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
This is Free Talk Live. It's talk radio you control. Give us a call. Let us know what you're thinking about tonight. The phone number is 603-283-6160. Free Talk Live is brought to you by LibertyMinded.com. Official Free Talk Live gear like t-shirts and hoodies are available at LibertyMinded.com. Plus, you'll find a unique collection of cool and funny, liberty-oriented clothing at LibertyMinded.com. That's LibertyMinded.com. In the studio tonight, it's Stu.
And Richie Rich.
You know, I was into a story, and I decided I think I will just abandon it because it's so poorly written.
Okay. Did we at least get out, like, the highlights of what was being discussed in the story?
No.
Okay.
We can go back to it. It's really long and doesn't get to the point very quickly.
Okay.
The point of the story is that I guess it's pointing at the recent decisions by the White House to
criminalize protests.
Criminalize a certain kind of speech by students on campus.
Yeah. And this is another. Did it happen to be was it Columbia? Was that part of this one? Because that was also a recent one that I heard about, and might not be the same story, but might be in the same vein.
Was that Columbia University?
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that sound right?
This is a separate thing.
Okay.
And I see a news article about that, but that's not the one I was reading.
Okay.
This one, yeah, and that's part of the problem with this article. It doesn't really even get into these specifics.
Okay.
As far as I can tell at all.
So I'll just speak to the Columbia one then, since you don't want to read the rest of that article. The Columbia one was another weird one.
Yeah. Because
it was like two separate things. It was the right to free speech on campus, but also I think like the student or one of the students or the protesters like shut down a facility on campus through their protest, right? Which I would say isn't part of free speech. That's above and beyond, because it infringes upon the rights and liberties of the other students who also have a right to use those facilities as they're designed to be used.
Yeah, that sounds about right to me.
And again, so if you want to exercise your free speech, it's not like there's free speech zones, but you have to be mindful of the property rights. You know?
And that's one of the problems with people screaming about attack off free speech is that they'll go out and cause property damage and be like, and when a ramification comes, they're screaming, "No, my free speech."
Yeah, no, it's not how that works.
We're talking about different things here. You're allowed to say what you want. You're not allowed to do what you want.
Yeah.
Right now, we're getting
and to be very clear, what everyone's clamoring about free speech, like, is a First Amendment issue, and the First Amendment is very clear: Congress should make no laws. So just because your speech was shut down in whatever form or fashion because of, I'm going to say again, property rights, like, there's no First Amendment violation because nobody made a law.
That's right.
You can't just say what you want wherever you want, and it's not even like you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, because has been debunked and disproven as well. It's you have to be mindful and responsible and respectful of the rights of the property on which you're at. And so if you want to have free speech on your own property and scream and produce content or whatever it is you want to do, like, that's all you. But you can't come on to mine and expect me not to shut you down and then say your free speech rights were violated, because you don't have it everywhere.
That's right. We're going to go to the phones right now, where we've got a on-screen caller, maybe in Washington, D.C. On-screen caller, you're on Free Talk Live.
Maybe in his mom's basement?
It's Joe.
Baby.
I'm calling from the United States, the only area of the United States, Washington, D.C. You guys are foreigners.
Okay.
I'll take it. Secession for the win.
Yeah.
I've always felt like a foreigner anyways.
According to the tax code, am I right?
I don't know.
But there are too many unfixable problems with ANCAP and Lockean property. There's just too many of them. But first,
name one.
Contradictions you made. Oh, hold on. Just wanted to address some contradictions you made last week, and also Stu. First, you can't, because Bonnie hung up on me, but you can't criticize somebody's strategy.
I didn't criticize. Well, I had a question about your strategy, and to recap for those who didn't listen to last week's show because the archive never went up, Skeeter is a big fan of game theory.
I didn't even finish.
Well, I know, but I'm recapping for people who weren't able to listen to last week's show because the archive didn't go up. So to recap for new listeners,
done that if you give me the chance.
For new listeners and for those listeners who are just tuning in or didn't get the archive, I had a question for Skeeter last week because he said his goal is to debunk anarcho-capitalism, the Austrian School of Economics, and libertarianism. And Skeeter also admitted that he is a big fan of game theory, and that using game theory, he would be led to the optimal strategy for accomplishing this goal. And I suggested that having used game theory to come up with the optimal strategy for achieving his goal, he landed on losing arguments to talk show hosts twice a week on weekends. And that's what has happened based on all the evidence I have in front of me. So go ahead, Skeeter.
And value is subjective, so you can't criticize my strategy.
I didn't criticize it. It was a question is this how you came up to the strategy? You use game theory to say the best way to debunk Austrianism and libertarianism is to lose arguments on weekends to talk show hosts.
Yeah, you're trying to implicitly criticize my strategy. You can't do that. That's a performative contradiction.
No, it's an observation. It's an observation that I think in the eyes of most people would debunk your theory.
That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter in the strategy I choose.
I got you.
Subjective.
Yes, you're right.
Value is whatever I determine it to be. And
yes,
it's
and you have, and I don't think anyone else will share your value. That the best way to debunk the Austrian school and libertarianism is to lose arguments to talk show hosts every weekend.
The subjective theory of value says the value of that strategy to me is whatever I say it is.
Which is fine.
It doesn't matter on my strategy.
Okay.
So shut up, or you're committing a performative contradiction.
No, I'm just if you're agreeing, Skeeter, that is what your game theory has determined to be your optimal strategy to achieve your goal. I'm fine with that.
Plus I've already debated with a lot of, well, just one, but I have corresponded with the guy on subjective value. What's his name? The guy who does all the Mises lectures annually on subjective value. What's his
Jeff
name?
Deist?
No, not that dude.
Tom Woods, Robert Murphy.
No. The guy who does the annual lecture at the Mises Institute.
I don't know. Lou Rockwell. I don't know. I'm throwing out names of people I know right for the Mises Institute. And I think Jeff Deist or Deist or whatever is the current president of the Mises Institute, but I don't know who you're referring to.
I have his name here, but I have to search for it.
Okay.
It just slips on mine because I loaded my brain with all this property stuff. Oh yes. Oh yeah. Stu,
that must not take up a lot of space.
You can't. No, I have a dysfunction with short-term memory. That's why I had to
like I said, I used to work for a storage facility. I'm sure your brain is like the size of a 5x5 compared to the largest sizes we had available.
Just because my short-term memory is deficient, I can analyze very deeply.
I don't think so, because I now knowing that your short-term memory is deficient, I think that that's the reason why you're unable to internalize all of the rebuttals that you have received for what feels like years now that you've been losing arguments on this show. Right? You bring something up, and then we rebut it, and then you bring it up again next week. And I think the reason is because you haven't been able to internalize the answer and the rebuttals to what you're saying.
You guys, I don't even get my full point out. I somehow get hung up on, you argue against me when I'm gone, which doesn't address my point. And then I come back and I have to call back with the same topic again.
Well, then let me throw this out, Skeeter. I do a podcast on Saturdays. I do a podcast on Saturdays, and on at least 2 separate occasions, I have given you full access to the floor of the podcast to make your argument start to finish. Like, you went uninterrupted and unabated.
No, one time. One time you gave me the floor, but
and you weren't prepared to have it.
Feedback.
That's right, and we can't give you a full 3 hours here on, on a radio show.
But you can plug your YouTube channel.
Yeah. Okay. Evolutionary Capitalism. Go subscribe and donate. I take Dash. That crappy crypto. But anyways, look. Oh, I wanted to criticize Stu. You can't reference games. Games. I mean, you can't reference Tragedy of the Commons. Tragedy of the Commons is explained using game theory. Number 1. Number 2, it's utilitarianism. Number 3, it's against self-interest. And number 4, and more importantly, it uses objective value, right? Tragedy of the Commons is a quantitative argument where you add up people's utilities.
No, it isn't.
You can't do that with subjective value, stupid.
That's not what that is.
The Tragedy of Commons occurs because value is subjective.
Right. You kind of got it backwards there.
You can't argue Tragedy of Commons because you need to add up people's. You need to add up the total disutility of everybody
which is different amongst each person because everyone values it differently, right? If I don't want access to the commons, the Tragedy of the Commons doesn't affect me at all,
right?
Because my value is subjective. I don't need the commons.
There's nothing necessarily wrong with joint property, right? It's just the distribution of how people decide what to do with it. No. There's nothing wrong with joint problem.
There's nothing wrong with joint property. The problem is not how it's distributed. The problem is how the ownership came to be, right? Like if me and Stu want to go like half and half on a bag of coffee, that's perfectly fine, right? But if Stu wants half a bag of coffee and I don't, and then he makes me pay for it, right? And then, you paid for it, Rich, so now half of it is yours. That's a problem. Because I don't want it. I don't value it. He values it more than me, but he's going to steal from me in order to get his portion of it. So the problem isn't with how it's distributed. Even if you gave me half the bag that I'm not going to use and I don't want and will never drink, that has nothing to do with why it's wrong that that it's owned collectively.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with aggression, per se. There's nothing necessarily wrong with aggression.
And that's why you're not a libertarian, because that's one of the fundamental principles.
So the only ethic that you should predicate property on, this is what I'm getting to. So there are too many unfixable problems with ANCAP property. I mean,
well, you said that, and then I asked you to name one, and you moved on.
Hold on. You can't predicate property on anything else than the profit incentive, or else it will not be fundable.
No, I can. I absolutely can. I absolutely can. And this is one of the disagreements that I had with Peakless Mountaineer when he was still on the show. Is I believe that you can own property and keep it in its pristine state of nature, and as long as you're capable and able to fund it and defend it against aggression. Right? There's no profit at all there. It's just you own it in its pristine state of nature.
there are two things you have to overcome to do that, right? First, all things being equal, like the production from keeping it pristine has to pay for that protection.
No, it doesn't.
And number two,
it doesn't. Pause on number one, because you need not get to a number two. No, it doesn't. Because I can fund it from profits from other means. I can have multiple sources of income in order to keep that one pristine.
Yeah, but it all things being equal, like it drains you. Like it
yes, and I'm allowed to be drained in order to keep this property pristine. It need not generate a profit.
Inside of the protection costs are built-in opportunity costs. So if there's an opportunity cost with somebody else, you're going to have to fight them for it.
Yes.
They're going to be willing to pay up to the expected profit from that land.
And I can still fund it. I can still fund it through other income sources to defend it.
As long as you're productive in some other areas, but it's still a drain on you, all things being equal.
Yes. You're right. It's a drain. All other things being equal, it is a drain, and I'm allowed to be drained. It doesn't have to be profitable.
Mm-hmm. Freedom includes the freedom to make bad choices sometimes. Or a choice that may seem bad to somebody else, and
it's not even a bad choice.
Evolution doesn't stand for inefficient bad choices. Even a small inefficiency eventually will get selected against.
The value that I might obtain from that pristine state of nature property that I own may not be financial, right? It may be emotional or spiritual. I may like going to that pristine state of nature and just sitting in nature and doing nothing profitable at all, but recharging my spirituality, recharging my emotions. And insofar as those things hold economic value to me, even though they're not profitable, right? I will profit somewhere else in order to get that.
Put your money where your mouth is. Go pay to break out Ian from prison.
Oh, I wish.
Show me. Take on an unprofitable project. Show me, and I'll show you how evolution will punish you.
I already have an unprofitable project. I spend way too much money on video games.
Go do it. No, go do it. But go take on a very unprofitable project and see how many of these projects you can undertake. Just like a business, you'll go bankrupt eventually.
No, I won't, because I have a real job.
You take on enough.
I have a real job that funds my unprofitable video game addiction.
But first, I'm just so first let's just disagree about that, because and you're not willing to.
By disagreeing, you can just admit that you're wrong.
No, I'm not wrong.
You are.
Proven with game theory. And
no.
Evolutionary.
No, because I have a job and I fund unprofitable endeavors because it brings me joy aside from the profit motive.
Yeah. The thing about opportunity cost is you can't see how evolution implicitly punishes you.
I can buy video games, or I can buy Bitcoin, or I can buy Goldbacks, or I can buy whatever, or I can leave it in a savings account and not do anything with it. I could work less so that my total income only equals my basic necessities and expenditures. I get the concept of opportunity cost. But right now, I overwork in order to fund a video game addiction.
But your defense is limited by your total production, right? As soon as somebody has an incentive to aggress against you that's greater than your total production, it will be taken over. You agree?
No.
You can't deny that.
No.
Your ability. So let's say there's this pristine land you want to keep pristine, right? Your ability to protect that is limited to your total, how much you can pay to protect that land. As soon as the dollar amount of incentive to aggress against you is greater than that, you're going to lose in the market because you're not the most efficient.
No, I'm not going to lose in the market. I'm going to lose a physical battle by someone aggressing against me, because I don't have to sell it. They'll have to take it. That's not a market function.
Take it over.
That's not a market function. I'm not losing in the market.
Market function.
No, that's just theft.
That's just theft.
So That is, but it is a market function. That's my whole point.
Well, theft has been made a market function.
There's nothing necessarily wrong with aggression.
Hey, Skeeter, I got a question for you.
So let me get to the point. Hold on, let me get to a quick point.
All right, make it quick.
One of the main problems with libertarian property is resource hoarding. Right?
No.
No.
You can't go on if with a faulty premise. I don't allow it. You have to say something accurate and truthful, and then you can go on.
Yeah. Stop just disagreeing with me without presenting an argument. But
you have to stop. You have to present something to build upon. And saying that the problem with libertarian property is hoarding is absurd.
How does resource hoarding make a problem?
I told you with opportunity cost. So here.
That's not an answer. Everything has an opportunity cost.
For instance, homesteading, right? You are not the most efficient with the property just because you discover it. Just like you can explain IP with this.
Yes, right? You are not the most efficient just because you discovered it. But the fact that you discovered it and can defend it against aggression means that it is yours.
God.
I don't know. Maybe you can. Maybe you can run it more efficiently by terms of quality rather than quantity than you can by going to work and doing things in the market.
Value, Stu. Objective values. There's only one value. There's no quantity and quality, right?
There has to be. You already admitted that someone who can do better will try to take it over.
I think that's pretty silly to say there's no quantity and quality. I mean, these are things that exist. Come on.
That's why evolution gave us money, in order to help us measure objective value. When money's perfect, it will perfectly measure objective value in the form of profit, right?
No. So you can't go on because that's wrong. Right. It will measure subjective value in terms of what people are willing to trade for.
No.
This is the reason you never get to your point, Skeeter, is because you got to preface it with like 30 logical contradictions, and then when we call those out, you just got to yell about it.
No, how is that a logical contradiction? Profit is not subjective.
Okay, profit is not subjective. You can objectively measure profit. Yes.
And that's the main measure of value.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. I already gave the example of my pristine state of nature and the value that I derive from it being spiritual and emotional, not economic.
Right? Why do
in evolutionary game theory, profit is measured in terms of the actor's fitness or their.
Well, then I reject evolutionary game theory as the proper way to measure these things.
It's the same thing, except in under my theory, profit is measured in how closer an action takes us to the perfect evolutionary being.
And I think it's pretty clear that we all reject your theory because it's fallacious, based on faulty premises
and who gets to
wrong.
Be the value setter?
Stu, you can't have him interrupting me just saying it's wrong, right?
All right.
You can't have him just interrupting me just saying it's wrong. He has to let me get my full point out.
I don't let you build on a faulty premise.
It's like trying. There's no faulty premise.
I reject your premise. We need to go back a step.
Yeah, I have a hard time with contradictions too.
I told you a capitalist system is built on the profit incentive, not on a Lockean property ethic. A Lockean property ethic directly goes against the profit incentive. You can't have the two in purity. You can't combine the two and say.
And as far as a capitalist system, there's a reason I hyphenate anarcho-capitalist. Because I know that capitalism is a loaded term. Most people associate it with the state and what the state does to protect the capitalist crony class. Yeah. And I go, it's not what I'm talking about.
Let me quickly drop that because I don't know how much time I have left. But let me get to restitution. Restitution is not a profitable. It's not something evolution will select for. Restitution is a sunk cost. It's moral hazard.
It's not. No, wrong again. It's not a sunk cost. It's justice. It's making someone whole for the damage you have done.
That's a fantasy.
No, that's the definition.
That's just sad that you think that way, Skeeter. Hey, can I ask you a question? I've let you talk a whole bunch. Can I ask you one question, Skeeter?
No, I'm not finished.
All right, then you're going to have to finish on another night. Sorry, Skeeter.
Bye.
It was fun, though. I just wanted to ask him if he thought it would be a good idea if, like, Elon Musk could make a brain chip that just turned all of humanity, that takes it into the Borg collective from Star Trek, where nobody has individual thought and we all just going towards maximum efficiency.
Devolve into bees or ants.
Would he call that a good idea? Because I would not call that a good idea. I kind of like individuality. What do you think? Give us a call.
I don't let people build on contradictions and faulty premise.
If somebody can, I don't know, translate what Skeeter is trying to say, that would be helpful. Maybe.
Watch his YouTube.
I don't have time for that. Give us a call, 603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live.
Hi, I'm Derek J. To me, an activist's calling is to actively work to advance a cause. The cause for which I work is personal freedom. I believe my life is best when I engage in voluntary interactions and self-government. I reject the idea that anyone else has a higher claim to my life or my body than I do. I see people who call themselves the government as a threat to my personal freedom. I realize you may feel differently, but my relationship with the people who call themselves the government is completely involuntary. If Starbucks used some of its money to drop bombs, I wouldn't shop there. So why would I support the American empire? The empire does not require my consent.
Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree. Watch it for free and order the Director's Cut DVD at victimlesscrimespree.com. That's victimlesscrimespree.com. The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount. There are lots of ways to listen to Free Talk Live. Our podcast has been around since podcasts began, and now the FTL feed is loaded with content besides our full show archives. Did you know that we make it easy for you to customize your podcast subscriptions? We have different feeds, one that includes only our full shows, one with just the Daily Digest, and our main feed that includes everything. You decide what you listen to. It's quick and easy to customize your feeds at feeds.freetalklive.com. That's feeds.freetalklive.com.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next, after the news, here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer with a look back at some of the week's top stories. Hundreds of people were killed in Israeli airstrikes in Gaza after the collapse of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Tel Aviv says it's carrying out the strikes because Hamas rejected proposals to extend the ceasefire agreement. Hamas called the attacks a blatant violation of all international and humanitarian conventions. FSN's Giles Gibson has more from Tel Aviv.
The Israeli military has carried out some airstrikes inside Gaza since the expiry of the first phase of the ceasefire agreement. But really, these strikes that started in the early hours of Tuesday local time were on a completely different scale. International aid workers have described being woken up by loud explosions which shook the buildings that they were in. And then as dawn broke, hundreds of people started turning up at hospitals inside Gaza, the remaining healthcare facilities inside the enclave. There are lots of photos and videos circulating of large crowds outside the entrances to those hospitals. And we've also heard from the Palestinian Red Crescent saying that hospitals inside Gaza are overwhelmed.
U.S. President Donald Trump says his call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was very good and that peace talks are on track. The pair spoke a day after Trump talked with Russian President Vladimir Putin, who said he would be willing to pause attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Within hours of that call, both sides launched fresh strikes, accusing each other of targeting oil facilities and power plants. FSN's Kate Fisher reports from Washington.
Donald Trump taking a very different tone than after the last time these two leaders spoke, which was, of course, during that angry Oval Office meeting here in Washington last month. On his Truth social media platform, Donald Trump saying that most of the conversation was based on the call he had with Vladimir Putin yesterday in order to align both Russia and Ukraine in terms of their requests and needs. And he said, we are very much on track. So certainly Donald Trump suggesting that things are still going well, despite the fact that Volodymyr Zelensky was concerned after the readouts from that call between Putin and Trump yesterday.
The World Meteorological Organization confirmed 2024 as the hottest year on record in 175 years. FSN's Jody Jacobs has more.
Glaciers and sea ice are rapidly melting, contributing to a rise in global sea levels. The number of tropical cyclones, floods, droughts are also increasing in number and size. These worrying trends are all contained in the latest UN report on global climate, and which the WMO says is contributing to worsening food crises and fueling massive economic losses. The World Meteorological Organization says the report's findings are a wake-up call, and that the record-breaking global temperatures in 2024 were primarily driven by increasing greenhouse gas emissions. And projections suggest these temperatures could just get worse if the world isn't able to significantly reduce emissions. Jody Jacobs, New York.
U.S. President Trump signed an executive order on Thursday fulfilling a campaign pledge to dismantle the nation's Department of Education. President Trump will need help from Congress to make that a reality, but he has already taken steps to reduce its authority and has cut much of its workforce. FSN's Mitch McCann reports.
Despite polling showing that dismantling the Department of Education is an unpopular move, it remains a key campaign pledge Mr. Trump hopes to act on as he plans to give more power to state governments. According to USA Today, Mr. Trump's executive order will also call for the uninterrupted delivery of services, programs and benefits on which Americans rely. The idea of closing the department isn't new for Republicans, with efforts to close it dating back to the 1980s. However, the push has gained steam in recent years due to what many in the party view as progressive agendas being taught to children. 50 million school kids attend public school in the US. While the majority of their funding comes from states and municipalities, the federal government accounts for around 10% of total school funding. Mitch McCann, New York.
London's Heathrow Airport was closed all day on Friday after a fire at a nearby electricity substation that provides it with power. Heathrow is Europe's busiest airport, and hundreds of thousands of passengers have been affected, with disruption set to continue for days to come. Those are some of the top stories from the past week. Ira Spitzer.
In this week's Onion Tips section, 5 easy ways to adapt your deplorable and parasitic existence for the upcoming Armageddon. Tip 1. Focus on preparing your home for any number of disaster situations, which still probably won't take your mind off of your impending death or the myriad mistakes you made in your short, pitiful life. Tip 2. Make sure your linens are clean prior to the upcoming catastrophe, as these are likely the very same sheets on which you will soon be slowly asphyxiated. Tip 3. Take some time off work and spend your last days free from the bonds of the oppressive machine that was just about the only thing giving you a purpose to your otherwise insignificant days. Tip 4. Spend your final waking minutes before the end of the world with your family, knowing full well you'd rather be doing a number of other gratifying yet completely depraved things. Right, sicko? In other news, a smitten foot fetishist thinks these may be the two. A woman and her gay best friend go on another one of their little adventures, and a dead daughter would have wanted a $220 million liability settlement.
This is the Onion News Network.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live. Free Talk Live.
This is Free Talk Live. Talk radio you control. 603-283-6160 is the phone number if you want to give us a call. I bet you do better than our last caller.
Low bar.
very low bar. Are you tired of the oppressive rules and moderation of the big tech social media sites? Our Mastodon server at social.freetalklive.com can set you free. Mastodon is free, open source, decentralized, and federated. Multiple apps are available for iOS, Android, Windows, Mac, and Linux. Social.freetalklive.com. In the studio tonight, it's Stu.
And Richie Rich. You would have to be like, you can make a living being the Limbo World Champion to be able to get lower than Skeeter on a regular basis.
Have you seen the South Park episode with lowering the bar, and they had James Cameron was in it, and the guy that does the song for Toy Story?
Okay. I have not. I've got an unfortunate relationship with South Park that's entirely my fault.
What's that guy's name? Something Newman? He keeps lowering the bar like to the depths of the ocean, and so
okay.
James Cameron goes down there to raise the bar. It's pretty funny. Yep,
yes, that's what you have to do with Skeeter. It's that low, below sea level.
Skeeter has lowered it even further, so give us a call, and I'm sure you will shine. Until then, I believe Richie has something he'd like to share with us.
I'm going to lower the bar a little bit too, because this is a throwback to the old days. We're going to call this the number 2 story.
Hooray, number 2 story.
The number 2 story. United pilot attacked constipated passenger and had him arrested for hogging the bathroom.
Oh, man.
Says a lawsuit.
Attacked him?
Yeah.
Come on now.
Like, okay, so before we get into this, let me ask you, if you're on a flight going somewhere, mm-hmm. and you have to use the bathroom, mm-hmm. what's an acceptable amount of time to occupy that space for yourself?
I think it would depend on how busy the flight is, and I don't know. Like,
okay.
If it's only half capacity, that's going to double the amount of time you can be in there.
That you can be in there, but I mean, you get your business done, like poop or get off the pot, right? Like,
definitely want to be respectful about it.
Okay.
You're going to want to, not take your luxury time in there.
Right. It's mostly uncomfortable too. Okay. So no set amount of time, just variable depending on the situation.
You got to do what you got to do. Sometimes it doesn't all want to come out,
okay.
Sometimes it's not cooperating.
All right. Fair enough. An Orthodox Jewish traveler says he was yanked off the toilet with his trousers down and subjected to an anti-Semitic tirade while nearby passengers gawked. So this is another one of those, like, was it really anti-Semitic? Did it have anything to do with his ethnicity or religious background, or is it just one of those things?
Yeah, I doubt it. But people are going to jump there.
Yeah. A constipated New Jersey man flying home from Mexico claims the cabin crew became upset that he was monopolizing the plane's lavatory, prompting an enraged pilot to break down the bathroom door, yank the pantsless traveler off the toilet, and dress him down in a shocking anti-Semitic tirade while nearby passengers gawked. Upon landing, Yisrael Lieb, an Orthodox Jew clad in religious garb, was pulled off the United Airlines 737-800 and arrested by U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents who allegedly told him, "You have no rights here," according to a federal lawsuit obtained by The Independent, reputable news source. Lieb, 20, so young kid, contends that he was subjected to physical injuries, extreme emotional distress, and anxiety, and says in his complaint that he feels sexually violated and embarrassed after having been publicly exposed in the nude. In an email on Thursday, United spokesperson said, "We don't have anything to share." CBP acknowledged the Independent's request for comment, but did not follow up by the time of publication. The flight in question took off from the Riviera Maya resort town of Tulum at 4:30 p.m. on January 28th and was headed for Houston, Texas, where Lieb was scheduled to catch a connecting flight to New York, according to his complaint. About a half an hour into the journey, it says Lieb got up from his seat and headed to the toilet in the rear of the aircraft. Roughly 20 minutes later, When he hadn't returned, a flight attendant woke up Lieb's neighbor, identified in his complaint as Jacob Sabag, and asked him to make sure Lieb was all right. When Sabag, 21, knocked on the restroom door, Lieb replied that everything was fine, but he was experiencing constipation and said he would be out shortly. Sabag relayed this to the stewardess and returned to his seat, the complaint states. Around 10 minutes after that, the pilot approached Sabag and requested that he accompany him to the restroom to once again try and get Lieb out. The complaint goes on. Once there, the pilot began yelling loudly at Lieb, demanding he leave the bathroom immediately, then turned to Sabag and began loudly demanding he force Lieb out of the bathroom, according to the complaint. It says Lieb responded immediately, telling the pilot through the door he was okay, he was finishing up, and he would be out momentarily. At this point, according to the complaint, the pilot became visibly enraged, broke the lock on the door, and forced the door to the bathroom open, pulling Lieb out of the bathroom with his pants still around his ankles, exposing his genitalia to Sabag, several flight attendants, and the nearby passengers on the plane. Lieb quickly pulled his pants back to his waist after being allowed to set his feet, the complaint states, which he says injured his head and legs when they smacked into the restroom door frame. With Sabag leading Lieb, the pilot proceeded repeatedly push the two back to their seats while making threats of getting them arrested and making scathing remarks about their Judaism and how Jews act, according to the complaint. Upon arrival in Houston, 5 to 7 CPB officers boarded the plane and instructed all passengers to remain seated, the complaint says. Then they approached Lieb and Sabag, handcuffed them, and took them to a detention facility inside the terminal, the complaint alleges. While being escorted from the plane, Lieb stated that two of them have legal rights to know why they are being detained, according to the complaint. The CPB agent responded that this isn't county or state. We are Homeland Security. You have no rights here. Apparently annoyed with Lieb's question, one of the CPB officers tightened his cuffs to the point he verbally spoke out against the pain. The complaint states, it says Lieb pleaded with officers, pointing out that he was cooperating fully and insisting he was not a threat. But the complaint alleges Lieb and Sabag were instead thrown into separate cells and handcuffed to tables while they and their luggage were subjected to intrusive, unconsented, unwarranted, and unreasonable searches. Lieb and Sabag were released without charges, but missed their connecting flight home, which took off for New York while they were still detained, the complaint states. They were rebooked for free on a flight leaving the next day, according to the complaint. However, it says the pair had to incur additional charges for hotels and food during the delay, essentially negating the price of their complimentary flight. Lieb and Sabag both claim the too tight handcuffs caused severe wrist pain, which they say persisted for days afterwards. The entire situation, the complaint alleges, was further worsened by the United pilots' anti-Semitic rhetoric, and says he only escalated with the encounter with Lieb because he was Jewish. Lieb and Sabag are demanding damages in the amount to be determined at trial, plus attorney's fees. End of the article. So
it sounds like the pilot yelled some
is this how Jews behave? Are you acting appropriately for a Jew? You Jew.
Well, I mean, yeah.
That's not a quote, by the way. That's how I envision the encounter going down.
It depends on how he worded it to me. But that's I've
been on small
that's
planes.
An interesting story because to me that pilot is kind of out of line.
And it's a United pilot, too. And they've got so much backlash already from other problems that United has had with, planes going down, et cetera. Like, why make it worse?
Yeah, ripping the door right off and everything. Like, man,
seems excessive.
That's a bit of an overreaction.
Right, like, dude.
But on the other hand, you're in the plane and don't take the bathroom the whole time, man.
Especially if you're constipated.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he's been in there for half an hour.
Right. Get up and
not doing his business.
Get up and stretch and see if you can move it along, and then come back to the bathroom.
You can be constipated in your seat.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then when it moves, then you go. All right.
All right. We've got a caller on the line. This is an on-screen caller in Ohio, I think. You're on Free Talk Live.
OH.
First of all, I want to say that story reminds me of a time I was on a Delta Airlines flight, and we actually had to keep circling the airport because somebody refused to get out of the bathroom. So this is not a new story of people hogging bathrooms. At one point, the pilot got over the loudspeaker and said the words, "Come out with your pants up."
At least that pilot has a sense of humor and didn't abandon the cockpit to break the door down.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe this one just was having a bad day. But I was going to set the bar maybe a little lower than Skeeter.
Oh no!
But
well, let's see if he can.
No. I kind of want to touch back. I'm not sure if you remember this, Rich. You and I recently had a conversation on Social Security. I think it was a week or two ago.
Sounds like last week. Go ahead.
Yes. Okay. I was kind of trying to get more into your objections to the program, right? Because I don't think there was really anything substantive. There's no Bonnie on tonight, so there's no condescending comments about me being mad that she doesn't pay like pennies in taxes or something.
Okay.
But what are your main objections? Because from my perspective, the program seems to be doing its job exceptionally well.
So my objection is always, how is it funded? And if the answer is like not voluntarily, then I object. Right? So you made it very clear last week that despite my being confident in my financial ability to secure my future, that I still must be forced to pay into this system. And therefore I object fundamentally, a priori, no matter how good the results might be, you can't do it with theft of me.
Yep, I'm with
What is
Richie
the
on this one.
alternative?
What is it?
What is the
not
alternative?
having one?
Because we know.
Well, go ahead.
That's absurd. That creates more suffering. The historical evidence before Social Security is very, very clear. Before it was instituted, the overwhelming majority of elderly individuals lived in poverty. Not all of them were able to save money. They would have health problems. Their family support, charity, etc. Well, they had that option back then to have a voluntary charity, and it never sprung up, despite this being a massive issue.
Right. So,
and it gets to the point where, sorry, real quick, I just want to reiterate.
Yeah, no,
it's
go ahead.
not a retirement program at all. It is social insurance. And if you know anything about insurance, you know that having a larger pool makes it more efficient. And if younger, wealthier individuals were able to opt out, that would leave nothing but higher risk participants, and that would make it completely unsustainable.
And I would suggest that the vast majority of insurance companies today are mostly voluntary, and the ones that aren't, I would object to. So I happen to live in New Hampshire, where car insurance is not mandated. So I don't have to have it, right? I own a home. I don't own a home. I rent, so I don't have to pay into homeowners insurance. I voluntarily agreed to have renters insurance. It's mandated by my lease, but it's something that, because I have a huge video game collection that would suck if it went up in a fire or theft, I would choose to get into because the price is reasonable to me.
Because it's not mandated.
And it's not mandated. Well, it's mandated by the lease, but it's a voluntary agreement with the landlord.
But the price is lower because it's not mandated. As well.
Right.
Same with auto insurance. It's cheaper in New Hampshire to get your auto insured.
And I don't carry it.
Isn't it? Don't you have to, but hold on. I maybe you guys know better because you live in New Hampshire and I don't. I find the whole not having car insurance thing to be preposterous. But I do have to ask.
Before you go on, then
I drove in Utah for 3 years without insurance, and I saved myself about $3,500.
But isn't there a clause in New Hampshire? Correct me if I'm wrong, where you assume liability no matter what if you get into a wreck if you don't have insurance?
No. So I was in a wreck last June. I proceeded lawfully through an intersection at a green light, and I was T-boned by I'm going to call him a teenager because he was a young kid. I don't know his exact age. I think he might have been like 18 or 19 around there. And he proceeded through a red light and T-boned me. And, not knowing what to do without having to call my insurance company, I got his insurance company information, and I called them. And I had to go down and, get the police report as an intermediary step to get that information. And I had his phone number, so when I texted him back and forth to obtain the information, and I went to the auto body shops nearby, and I got quotes, and I called his insurance company. I said, "Hey, I don't have insurance, but this is clearly your guys' fault. Here's the documents saying as such," and his insurance adjuster came out, gave me his quote, which was well below the quotes I got from the auto body shop, which again I objected to. And he said, "Well, don't worry about it. You know, we handle this all the time. We'll work it out with the auto body shop." And they paid the auto body shop directly. So I dropped my car off. It was held there for 3 or 4 weeks. I forget how long the auto body shop had it to do their repairs. And Geico paid the auto body shop directly for repairs to my car because their client, their customer, caused the damage to me.
Did they also pay for a rental car during that time?
I didn't ask because I didn't need one.
You can usually get them to do it.
Yeah. I could have, but I have a backup car, so it didn't impact me in that way, and I didn't care.
Yep.
But yes, so that's how it works.
I think it would be useful for me to look into maybe I think it would be. I'm not sure how I would word this, but I think it might be worth looking into how many people chase individuals in New Hampshire for damages as compared to other states that mandate car insurance to try to figure out whether or not that's an efficient system. I don't know.
I don't care if it's efficient though. I care whether it's voluntary. So much like Skeeter wants like profitability and evolutionary capitalism, and if it's not profitable, it doesn't make sense. I go like, I don't care if it's profitable or not. It's whether or not I'm able to opt out, or whether or not you're going to have an agency with guns force me to do it.
So I don't think you care about having an efficiently run society then even. You're just so hung up on this idea that everything has to be voluntary, regardless of how stupid it is or regardless of how much suffering is incurred as a result.
Yes. But the second part of that is yes, and I believe that it would be better off and more moral and ethical and more efficient if it was voluntary. So I think it's Thomas Sowell.
In spite of the fact that we know this doesn't happen.
Well, you know that it didn't happen in the past under whatever paradigm that was, but at the same time, right? Like, had I been alive during that time, or even now, right? Like, why do I have the responsibility to pay for other people's bad mistakes, right?
You get the benefit as well.
No, I don't. I incur the cost.
Yes, no,
I'm not on Social Security.
Right?
I'm not on Social Security.
Available to you,
what's that? But
it will be available to you if and when you need it. Whether or not you become disabled, even though our government makes it purposely difficult to get on disability.
And so there's a meme floating around that shows like the payout difference on what you would get by paying into Social Security for your lifetime versus what you would get if you like invested that money in, the S&P 500 or a savings account or whatever it happens to be. And it turns out over the course of a lifetime, you're much better off having privately invested that money than the maximum payout you're expected to get from Social Security. And so forcing me to pay in is a net loss over the course of my lifetime. And that's wholly inefficient.
You're comparing dedicated retirement programs, which, by the way, I contribute to a Roth IRA. I suggest people save for their own retirement. I'm not saying rely on the government to pay for everything, right? I would never suggest that. I'm not.
But that's what the vast majority of people on Social Security do when they get to retirement age.
Do you think people intentionally are sitting there? You see, this is why I kind of left the libertarian circle 5-6 years ago, because it seems to misunderstand human sociology to a large degree. Do you think people are sitting in their 20s, 30s, 40s thinking, oh, man, I'm just going to intentionally not save for retirement because Social Security has got me? No, there's something called a present bias. And a lot of younger people have that. That's why Social Security exists as an insurance. It was supposed to be a part of something known as the three-legged stool. Okay. The idea would be that Social Security supplements your pension back when pensions existed and got replaced by 401ks by and large, which have proven to be a disaster and don't work, and savings. It was supposed to be a part of that pie.
Yes.
But ultimately, what happens is younger people don't save for their retirement because the cost of living has increased tenfold. We exist within a credit economy. And fewer and fewer people, I think it's like 77% of the country is living paycheck to paycheck. I highly doubt that's because 77% of the country is just doing stupid things. Ultimately,
but how am I responsible to make up for their deficiency?
Because you would, trust me when I say this, you would prefer a society where 2/3 of elderly folks are kept out of poverty and not being in the streets, creating crimes, creating thefts, using our local services like police, ambulance, etc., because they're homeless, that incurred cost is a hell of a lot bigger than just paying them out Social Security. And that's been proven time and time again. It's the same reason that housing the homeless is cheaper than actually letting them be homeless, and why the Finnish just started housing homeless people, and they don't incur the cost of that anymore.
And whereas I might prefer that, what I am unwilling to do is make other people pay for my preference.
Ultimately, human beings, as you know, like I just described, things like present bias and whatnot, ultimately human beings are only going to care about themselves by and large. And I know libertarian circles like to deny this, but every time I've ever talked to individuals that are part of the libertarian movement, I suggest this is a good idea, and they say, oh, well, let's fund that voluntarily.
Yes.
And then I asked if they would fund it, and they say, no, it's not my problem.
Yes, you're correct.
No,
and I'm one of them.
You're just creating a backward society. So you're just creating a backward society. You're creating an inefficient society just because you don't want to participate in the social contract.
No.
You want to make your own rules.
No. What I think I'm attempting to create is a moral society where knowing that people can't rely on others being stolen from will make better choices throughout their life, or suffer the consequences individually.
That's right.
Like, I'm not a contributor to charity. I'm valuable. Like, you need to pay me.
It isn't stealing, though.
You don't build a society based on slavery and then call it, better for everybody because they get a bed to die in. That's not moral.
The only way taxation is not theft is if you're one of those like didactic individuals or pedantic individuals that go like, well, it's actually extortion, right? It's theft.
Which is still theft.
It is, because I don't want to pay, and if I don't pay, they will hurt me.
This conversation has some decent points. Do you want to hang on the line? Oh, he left. All right, give us a call. This is Free Talk Live, 603-283-6160. What do you think? Is taxation actually theft? I think it is. Free Talk Live.
This hour of Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. Tired of the ever-inflating US dollar? You can live your life on Dash instead with some handy websites. BitRefill.com has been accepting Dash for years and has a ton of big-name retailers and brands including grocers, gas stations, phone refills, Amazon, and even prepaid MasterCards. Plus, many of their gift cards are available at a discount. But what about paying your bills? Spritz.finance can do that, and they can send dollars to your bank account in case you still need those for some reason. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges, including the decentralized Maya protocol, and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get and use Dash. Start by learning more at Dash.org. Thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. Visit Dash.org to learn about Dash. Dash.org.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer with a look back at some of the week's top stories. Hundreds of people were killed in Israeli airstrikes in Gaza after the collapse of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Tel Aviv says it's carrying out the strikes because Hamas rejected proposals to extend the ceasefire agreement. Hamas called the attacks a blatant violation of all international and humanitarian conventions. FSN's Giles Gibson has more from Tel Aviv.
The Israeli military has carried out some airstrikes inside Gaza since the expiry of the first phase of the ceasefire agreement. But really, these strikes that started in the early hours of Tuesday local time were on a completely different scale. International aid workers have described being woken up by loud explosions which shook the buildings that they were in. And then as dawn broke, hundreds of people started turning up at hospitals inside Gaza, the remaining healthcare facilities inside the enclave. There are lots of photos and videos circulating of large crowds outside the entrances to those hospitals. And we've also heard from the Palestinian Red Crescent saying that hospitals inside Gaza are overwhelmed.
U.S. President Donald Trump says his call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was very good and that peace talks are on track. The pair spoke a day after Trump talked with Russian President Vladimir Putin, who said he would be willing to pause attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Within hours of that call, both sides launched fresh strikes, accusing each other of targeting oil facilities and power plants. FSN's Kate Fisher reports from Washington.
Donald Trump taking a very different tone than after the last time these two leaders spoke, which was, of course, during that angry Oval Office meeting here in Washington last month. Donald Trump saying that most of the conversation was based on the call he had with Vladimir Putin yesterday in order to align both Russia and Ukraine in terms of their requests and needs. And he said, we are very much on track. So certainly Donald Trump suggesting that things are still going well, despite the fact that Volodymyr Zelensky was concerned after the readouts from that call between Putin and Trump.
London's Heathrow Airport was closed all day on Friday after a fire at a nearby electricity substation that provides it with power. Heathrow is Europe's busiest airport, and hundreds of thousands of passengers have been affected, with disruption set to continue for days to come. And the World Meteorological Organization released its latest state of the global climate on Wednesday, confirming that 2024 was the hottest year on record in 175 years. From Bureaus Worldwide,
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
This is Free Talk Live. It's talk radio you control. The phone number here is 603-283-6160. Give us a call. Let us know what you're thinking about tonight. Again, that phone number is 603-283-6160. Some of you have wanted to support Free Talk Live's mission on a monthly basis, but don't want to support Patreon. Now we have an alternative that also helps our premier streaming platform, Odyssey. Visit video.freetalklive.com and click join at the top of our channel. You can subscribe for $5 per month, and unlike other subscription services, Odyssey adds their processing fee on top, so it will cost a little over $5 per month, but Free Talk Live will receive the entire amount you pledged. Higher donation tiers are available if you are feeling so inspired. You will get a special membership badge that is visible in the Odyssey chat room, and there is now a members-only chat. This new subscription method is a great way to decentralize our direct listener support away from just Patreon and also support a libertarian-run business, Odyssey. Please visit video.freetalklive.com and click join to subscribe to our Odyssey channel and help support spreading our message around the planet. Visit video.freetalklive.com and click join today. In the studio tonight is Stu.
And Richie Rich.
And we're going to go right...
Before you do, I want to kind of put a tail end on the last conversation with the Social Security guy, because I feel like,
that was Stephen in Ohio.
Okay. Fine. One of the things that we didn't get to before the break was like, how would it be different, without the state using force? And he said that, libertarians won't do it because he talked to a lot of them. This is like, well, not my problem. I'm not contributing to a charity. And I said, I'm one of them, right? Like I don't do much charitable work. I've donated my hair a few times. I'll probably do that again when I'm ready to cut this one off. And yes, it's not my problem. However, there's a lot of people out there who will absorb that problem.
That's true.
Right? There's a ton of churches. They're looking for membership, right? You can join a church or a member organization, that might have this program. If it's something you're worried about, like I want to help old people. There's plenty of charities that are around today that will assist.
Right.
Local food banks.
And just because one massive program was never adopted in the private to take care of this,
right,
it doesn't mean it was never tried. You had Lions clubs that did pretty amazing things for the scale of one small town.
Right, and there's Habitat for Humanity and Habilitat and food banks that will assist with furniture and housing and homeless shelters and all this. And I would suggest that those people that care about those things would then contribute to them voluntarily.
Mm-hmm.
And in a marketplace, you can tell whether or not you'll have your choice of charities, so they'll be incentivized to run efficiently, to perform the task that they're charged with doing, or face going out of business or having your funds diverted to another charity that would. So just because libertarians or myself wouldn't, doesn't mean that you couldn't if that's something you value.
Right.
So if he wants to put together a retirement savings account for seniors and have wealthy people, contribute to it for some sort of social benefit or whatever, more power to you. And we would also suggest that those people would have more money to do so if they weren't stolen from by the federal government, by upwards of 30-40%, more of their income, right? They would have that much more disposable income that's currently being stolen in order to fund all these programs that ought to be funded voluntarily.
Yeah.
And if they're not, I'm fine with that too, because it's not my problem and I don't care.
Right. Yeah, and even if Social Security is a better outcome than not having it, I still agree that it does. You can't make something right that isn't right just because it hasn't a good outcome.
You can have a great outcome if you're spending other people's money against their will.
Yeah.
The one thing Skeeter was right about is you're not looking at the opportunity cost.
Yeah.
What would have happened if you didn't steal from people?
Right.
All right.
Yeah. There's a good short story. I think it was the guy that used to wear the beaver skin hats a long time ago. I thought he was a myth.
Yeah.
It's called Not Yours to Give.
Yes.
I think is what it's called. And
Davy Crockett.
Yeah, Davy Crockett.
King of the Wild Frontier.
And that was a good story that laid out this concept pretty well, where they levied a town to repair some old lady's house or something, and one farmer explains how it set him back pretty significantly to have to pay that.
And when you say
levy.
levy to town, Davy Crockett was a member of the government at the time.
Right.
They took a vote at the local council level to do this, thinking that, hey, we're doing a good deed. We're helping this lady repair her home.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't that he was just not a mythical figure. He was a town representative, a local legislator.
Right. And then he had a conversation with a local farmer that showed him how maybe it wasn't such a good idea. Maybe it wasn't so benevolent as he thought in the first place.
And the reason the farmer said that wasn't because it wasn't a great idea to do for the lady.
Mm-hmm.
It was because they were appropriating funds that weren't theirs to give.
Right.
Right. You took my money that could have been used for my farm in order to help her buy or repair her house.
Right.
And number one, that's unethical and unconstitutional at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So on both fronts, it wasn't the right thing to do. And the farmer basically said, I can't vote for you again, and because you don't follow the Constitution, and you've taken what's not yours and given it to somebody else.
Yep.
Even though you thought it to be charitable.
That's right. Yeah, I fully agree. I wish Stefan would get that. But right now we're going to the phones where we have on screen caller. You're on Free Talk Live.
Hello, guys.
What up?
Great show tonight. I was going to ask you a little off topic here, but how do you guys define anarchy?
No rulers.
Yeah.
No rules. That's right. Exactly.
No rules. No rulers.
You can't even play a board game without rules. Right? No ruler. Right. No masters. I would specifically say no masters, no slaves.
So isn't that an impossibility, though, with a honest understanding of human nature? I mean, absent this stinking system we have right now where the poop puppets have taken over here, you're going to have maybe some local warlords or maybe the
Why do you think that?
Hell's Angels, somebody be laying down the law. If it's not you, I mean, so
why do you
you're
think
going to
that?
be somebody, you catch somebody in your refrigerator, you're going to be the rule maker, aren't you? You're going to be making the rules.
Just for my family. I mean,
yeah.
because they desire it.
making and enforcing the rules, though? Somebody will be making and enforcing rules.
I think that might be a myth.
Republic rats.
So let's try to break this down a couple of different ways. Number one, we didn't say no rules; we said no rulers.
That's right.
And that
the rules exist.
What's the distinction there?
The general distinction is if me and Stu, like he said, are playing a board game, we will voluntarily agree to the rules. I'm not lording over Stu and compelling him to play a certain way, and he's not lording over me in the same form or fashion.
Right.
And if we change the rules mid-game, the game's no longer fun.
What's that?
How do you settle disputes in an anarchy?
We've talked about arbitration before. That can be inserted into the contract a priori, or agreed to after the fact by each of us picking an arbitrator and having them pick a third. I mean, a lot of these concepts have already been laid out.
That's been successfily done within our community.
No, I don't abide. I refuse to be under your any kind of restraint or jurisdiction. I call the shots.
That has happened within our community, and the way can I answer? The way that was handled, the time that I saw this happen was a reputation sort of thing, to where people in the community knew who was willing to have something arbitrated and who was refusing the arbitration, and they knew what the allegations were, and were left to make up their mind. And
social ostracization.
That's right. That's how that ends up.
So I also want to go back to your original question about the warlords. The fundamental difference between like the government and the warlords is what's acceptable in defense against their encroachment, right? Like right now, if a Hell's Angels broke into your house at 3:00 in the morning and started shooting, right, you would be justified in shooting back. And if you took their life, no one's going to say that you were in the wrong.
Right, and most street gangs are set up to conduct commerce within a small geographical area without competition.
And the current paradigm with the government is if they break into your house and at 3:00 in the morning and start shooting, and you shoot back and kill one of them, then you get the additional charge of killing a police officer.
So absent this larger looming coercion going on everywhere, as you know, it's just basically society celebrating slavery, then I kind of think people would just sort of get along and trade things with each other, and you wouldn't have a lot of need for arbitration.
Most people, I think you're right, but I mean, I think there's a certain subset. I mean, I've been around for a while. I mean, there's some you know what I'm talking about.
But the certain subset doesn't have the legitimacy of the people,
right?
And so if you take them out of society, it's a net good rather than a net negative under the current paradigm.
And a large portion of that would be deterred just by the
well armed, though, could take over society. You know, we wouldn't. I have no idea how this would all turn out, and I don't think neither do you, and nobody does. But it just seems to me that just the word anarchy is. I call myself a minarchist. And
because there's one government program that like you need to steal from people to maintain that you're not willing to let go.
Just have a little bit of slavery. Look, the rules exist, and there are rules. It's just what we call a cause and effect. And if you go around, you know, treating people poorly, you're going to get some poor treatment in return. And that's nature wrote that rule, and it doesn't matter if we write it down and say that, you know, if you violate this, you're going to spend time in a cage. We can do that, but it doesn't change what the law is. It's already existent.
I don't know. I'm not saying this system is absolutely horrible. As a matter of fact,
this system is absolutely horrible because it's predicated on theft.
It's predicated on lack of consent of the governed. Jefferson defined the legitimate government essentially as having the consent, or the legitimacy of government is derived from the consent of the governed.
That's right.
And you can't give your consent when Donald Trump and the rest of these bums are keeping secrets from us.
Yeah. And I would not give them my consent regardless. I would never consent to be ruled by anybody. So they will never have my consent, and therefore never have the social contract to govern me.
So we can all make our own rules then. So I can
on your own private property.
So when you and I have a dispute on our own private property, or it's all going to be private property, right?
Yes, but your rules don't apply on mine.
piece of property will have its own jurisdiction, right? So you'll have, I guess, some guy on, if you, I just think that they're.
Don't hurt yourself.
I love your show, and I love the fact that we get to talk about stuff like this, and I wish we had an honest competition of ideas about government, finally, where we could have the best among us in with a microphone all the time.
You do. It's called Free Talk Live on Sunday nights when Richie Rich is on.
That's right. I'm talking about in government, though. I'm talking about in the positions of highest power, where the most good and the most bad can be done. It would seem like we would have some honest attempt to try to find out who the best among us and what the best ideas among us are, instead of allowing these poop puppets
And here's
when you set the game up as we got to get the best of us to tell everybody else what to do, you're going to get the poop puppets.
That's a fundamental
straight
problem
for those jobs every time.
What was the dude from Ohio's name?
Necessarily. I mean,
Stephen.
How do you know that? I mean, how many people do you? We've had absolutely no attempt ever at allowing an honest competition of ideas about government.
So here's
anywhere on the planet.
Here's one thing that Stephen from Ohio might be correct about. When he said that, generally people are greedy, and Ayn Rand said it. People act in their own rational self-interest, and then and one thing that I think the anarcho-capitalists and the anarcho-communists generally agree on is that people may act badly, and what you have is the bad actors migrating to the source where they can derive the most power to lord over others. And right now, the state has the legitimacy that attracts bad actors.
Exactly. Of course. But why
So you end the state.
There's a lot of good people out there that are kept from running for office because there's no honest competition there's no honest forum.
Because there's a monopoly over the violence, and the bad actors migrate there and control the narrative. The only way to open up that ideas to competition is to end the monopoly on violence and then let those ideas flourish.
Maybe.
In a free, open market.
Maybe.
Free, open
sometimes
market. The market is dominated by the people who control the money, and there isn't one person in 10,000 in my travels who can even answer with any kind of wisdom or insight who creates our money and how do they do it.
The Federal Reserve.
The Federal Reserve, that's a concept or label. You're doing what Skeeter does now. Fallacy of reification.
Well, you said who creates the money? The Federal Reserve.
It's a concept or label. Concepts and labels don't create or do anything.
Okay, then Joe from accounting, who increments the dollar sign in the Federal Reserve's computer system.
Money's created at the moment that it's lent out.
Computer bank.
Right.
And the people who control that system control us all. It was somebody said one time, or several
don't say controls us all, because again, we're in New Hampshire. We have goldbacks and crypto, and we don't have to function in that system.
Either come up with some Federal Reserve notes, or someone on your behalf will come up with some Federal Reserve notes, or you will not have a place to be.
No, there are landlords here that take crypto for.
You have to have a place to put your head at night, or to grow food and to be.
There are landlords here. There are landlords here that take crypto for rent, and there are employers here that will pay you in crypto for services rendered.
To some degree, the caller is correct. At this time, as somebody is turning that crypto into dollars, to pay their property tax with or something.
Without using dollars, folks.
At this time, I think you're correct. Yes.
That's like the last transaction. And that's only because the government demands it.
Yes.
Yes.
Of course, yes.
So unyoke yourself from the restraints of the government and realize that you don't have to use dollars. We don't have to use dollars. There's plenty of alternatives, and people here, at least, are willing to take the alternatives. And if in the final transaction, like you do all this stuff in crypto and goldbacks.
Transactions are done in New Hampshire in cryptocurrency versus dollars.
What's that?
What percentage of the transactions?
Oh, I have no idea.
I'm sure it's very small.
Are done with cryptocurrency versus dollars.
I'm with Stu. I'm sure it's small, but
it is done.
Yeah,
it's done.
It's small too.
But it's done, and it's possible. And you said, like, you need a place to lay your head. Well, find a landlord that takes Bitcoin, and find an employer that pays in Bitcoin, right? And then your income outcome, at least on an individual basis, is secured.
There's at least one person in the state that refuses to touch dollars and lives just fine.
There you go.
But on the point of competition within government, I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes I do like to daydream that maybe something might be started that's small enough that it would be too burdensome to squash out. Small enough, decentralized enough.
If the government had stuck to the Constitution, you'd have a lot less libertarians complaining.
Of course,
right. Yeah. I think something might be started without having to abolish the current, Leviathan that exists. That could be successful.
It seems to me it's just a recognition of people that we have competitions about everything else. Like we have the best dancers, we have the best baseball players, we have the best food, etc. Some people would say, but and something that is what you want in a politician, I imagine anyway. I do is I want somebody with some great ideas. I want the people with the best ideas among us at least to be heard, whether or not they assume office. I believe once the best ideas are known to people, it doesn't not going to matter who's running the office. I mean, any bonehead will be able to.
I mean, that sounds like the goal of the original Libertarian Party.
It's the ideas that are important, and we don't. Why don't we have?
You do. You have libertarians running and losing with the best ideas.
I think there's plenty of ideas. It's a matter of it's a matter of consent being honored.
2 or 3 debates. Phony debates with 6 hand-picked poop puppets, the Democrats and Republicans, and they call those. I'm talking about something that should be going on all the time.
Yes, and the reason the debates are hand-picked like that is because Ross Perot got too close in '92.
Yeah,
the Democrats and Republicans changed the standard because Ross Perot got too popular, and that's why you don't have any third party getting close anymore.
Those aren't really debates. Those are press conferences for the stinking Republicans. I'm talking about a real debate where I get to ask you questions, and we get to decide what the agenda of or what the topics are going to be. What you think essentially is the most important idea that will improve government. That's what I want to hear from people. What are your best ideas as to how to improve government?
Yeah.
And I just don't see anything like that.
Go to a local town hall, try to get some mic time, and ask them. You'll be summarily dismissed and maybe ejected.
Yep.
You're the only guys that will let me talk, and I'm yelling at you.
Well, you can bring up some good ideas. Thanks for the call tonight.
You're not going to reform the government, and even if you create an alternative, if it's still predicated on theft, it's no good.
That's right.
And the current one is already predicated on theft, so there's no way to redeem it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to eliminate the theft, and the idea that theft is okay, right? Like I brought up with the warlords. The only difference between the warlords and the current government is how they are perceived in the minds of the people that they're lording over.
Yeah,
I can shoot a Hell's Angel. I can't shoot a cop if they break into my house.
Yeah, the government used to be predicated on the idea of divine right to rule, right? God told the king that he gets to rule over you. And once people had enough of that, they said, well, okay, now it's going to be on consent of the governed. And when they set up these new rules, they said, the point of having a government is to protect individual rights, and if it doesn't do that, it's time to alter or abolish.
But even the consent of the governed is a collective agreement. Right. Well, you had an opportunity to vote. You are outvoted by the majority. They consented on your behalf, and it's nonsense.
To me, right, it is nonsense. And to me, it seems like that's what ought to be driven at, is how to get better coverage of consent of the governed.
You already do. It's called churches.
More opt-out. You know what I mean?
Churches have already shown that you can have a viable governance system that's not tied to geography. And that's it.
Yeah. Churches is so hard though, because they always spout such nonsense.
That
was so full of adult
start a church
stuff.
You can compete with other churches by starting a church.
Yeah, that's true. Right now we're gonna go to the phones. We've got Sarah in New Mexico. You're on Free Talk Live. What's up, Sarah?
Yes, I was making a left with a friend in a car. I was in her car, and I was like, they have a U-turn sign. I wonder if they have allowed to do a U-turn here. And then at the signal light, it says, do not turn left on the red. I was like, what? Wait a minute. What?
So generally U-turns are permitted unless there is a sign disallowing it.
Right.
Right.
the way I
So
understand
there's nothing about the U-turn sign. Instead, but she thought it was illegal because they didn't have a U-turn sign on it.
She was
Instead of what they had was "Do not turn left on the red."
right. So when the light turns green, she could make a legal U-turn most likely.
Right, anyways, so then it went to "Do not turn left on the red." You know what that means is that
It means don't turn left when the red light is up.
Well, what it is, there's about 5 cars turning a left on the red after it turns red.
Yep.
So the cars that have the green light have to come halfway into the intersection, barely missing the last car turning a red. Like 5 cars turn a left.
Yep. And that's probably how I got T-boned last June, was because someone tried to make it through the red when it was not their turn to go.
Yeah, we call that rolling the red. It's fine to do if nobody's coming, but not so much if there's people coming.
There's also something apparently called a Pittsburgh left, which is you jump the turn before the other cars have a chance to go straight.
I'll put you on hold, Sarah. If you can hang out, we'll bring you back on the other side of this. We'll be back in a few. Give us a call. The phone number here is 603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live.
On Free Talk Live, we're bringing people to the ideas of liberty every day. From wrestling superstars like Glenn Jacobs.
You guys really are having an impact, I believe. Like I said, a lot of where I am now is due to listening to Free Talk Live. You changed my mind on some very important issues years ago.
To random people tuning in on the radio.
I was kind of stuck in the left-right paradigm. I heard your show by chance on a Saturday night. From there, I went on, joined the Free State Project, and become an amplifier. So, I mean, that's really the reason why I amp is because I know that if it wasn't for you guys being on as many stations as you are, I never would have found the ideas of liberty.
You can help more people hear the message of liberty by joining Free Talk Live's AMPS program on Patreon for as little as $5 a month. And you'll get access to special perks. Visit amps.freetalklive.com, amps.freetalklive.com.
Protection. Eleutheromania. The insatiable desire for freedom. Filibuster. Police state. It's the new 3-song heavy metal EP from Captain Kickass. Available now on your favorite music app or get it directly from CaptainKickass.com.
If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer with a look back at some of the week's top stories. Hundreds of people were killed in Israeli airstrikes in Gaza after the collapse of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Tel Aviv says it's carrying out the strikes because Hamas rejected proposals to extend the ceasefire agreement. Hamas called the attacks a blatant violation of all international and humanitarian conventions. FSN's Giles Gibson has more from Tel Aviv.
The Israeli military has carried out some airstrikes inside Gaza since the expiry of the first phase of the ceasefire agreement. But really, these strikes that started in the early hours of Tuesday local time were on a completely different scale. International aid workers have described being woken up by loud explosions which shook the buildings that they were in. And then as dawn broke, hundreds of people started turning up at hospitals inside Gaza, the remaining healthcare facilities inside the enclave. There are lots of photos and videos circulating of large crowds outside the entrances to those hospitals. And we've also heard from the Palestinian Red Crescent saying that hospitals inside Gaza are overwhelmed.
U.S. President Donald Trump says his call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was very good and that peace talks are on track. The pair spoke a day after Trump talked with Russian President Vladimir Putin, who said he would be willing to pause attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Within hours of that call, both sides launched fresh strikes, accusing each other of targeting oil facilities and power plants. FSN's Kate Fisher reports from Washington.
Donald Trump taking a very different tone than after the last time these two leaders spoke, which was, of course, during that angry Oval Office meeting here in Washington last month. On his Truth social media platform, Donald Trump saying that most of the conversation was based on the call he had with Vladimir Putin yesterday in order to align both Russia and Ukraine in terms of their requests and needs. And he said, we are very much on track. So certainly Donald Trump suggesting that things are still going well, despite the fact that Volodymyr Zelensky was concerned after the readouts from that call between Putin and Trump yesterday.
The World Meteorological Organization confirmed 2024 as the hottest year on record in 175 years. FSN's Jody Jacobs has more.
Glaciers and sea ice are rapidly melting, contributing to a rise in global sea levels. The number of tropical cyclones, floods, droughts are also increasing in number and size. These worrying trends are all contained in the latest UN report on global climate, and which the WMO says is contributing to worsening food crises and fueling massive economic losses. The World Meteorological Organization says the report's findings are a wake-up call, and that the record-breaking global temperatures in 2024 were primarily driven by increasing greenhouse gas emissions. And projections suggest these temperatures could just get worse if the world isn't able to significantly reduce emissions. Jody Jacobs, New York.
U.S. President Trump signed an executive order on Thursday fulfilling a campaign pledge to dismantle the nation's Department of Education. President Trump will need help from Congress to make that a reality, but he has already taken steps to reduce its authority and has cut much of its workforce. FSN's Mitch McCann reports.
Despite polling showing that dismantling the Department of Education is an unpopular move, it remains a key campaign pledge Mr. Trump hopes to act on as he plans to give more power to state governments. According to USA Today, Mr. Trump's executive order will also call for the uninterrupted delivery of services, programs and benefits on which Americans rely. The idea of closing the department isn't new for Republicans, with efforts to close it dating back to the 1980s. However, the push has gained steam in recent years due to what many in the party view as progressive agendas being taught to children. 50 million school kids attend public school in the US. While the majority of their funding comes from states and municipalities, the federal government accounts for around 10% of total school funding. Mitch McCann, New York.
London's Heathrow Airport was closed all day on Friday after a fire at a nearby electricity substation that provides it with power. Heathrow is Europe's busiest airport, and hundreds of thousands of passengers have been affected, with disruption set to continue for days to come. Those are some of the top stories from the past week. Ira Spitzer.
According to a report released Monday, Americans currently lead the world in compressing big sandwiches into sufficiently biteable sizes, outranking countries such as Germany, Slovenia, and Ukraine in their sheer capacity to squeeze BLTs, meatball subs, and grinders into shapes that will easily and efficiently fit into their open mouths. Researchers pointed out that in series after series of tests, Americans consistently topped international rankings by implementing over 800 pounds per square inch of compressive force course, on sandwich categories as diverse as banh mi, croque monsieurs, or gyros, rarely hesitating for more than a moment before diving in and pushing the bread together and wedging it into their mouths.
Even in the cases in which Americans fail to sufficiently compress a sandwich and, say, dropped a stray piece of bacon or avocado, they still led the pack on quickly scooping up this topping with their hands and eating it, sometimes even inventively doing so with a stray potato chip or french fry.
This is the Onion News Network. Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
This is Free Talk Live. Talk radio you control. 603-283-6160 is the phone number to call if you'd like to be part of the show tonight. And I would like to thank Millenber for being an amplifier with us here at Free Talk Live. That means that Millenber went to amps.freetalklive.com and signed up to support the show. AMPS stands for Advertise, Market, Promote, and Support. Thanks again to Millenber and everyone who supports us. Again, that's amps.freetalklive.com if you'd like to check out the perks and benefits of becoming an amplifier. In the studio tonight, it's Stu.
And Richie Rich.
And we were on the phones with Sarah. And Sarah, are you still there?
Yes, I just want to explain to you about this. I saw the sign and I said, that's when you have the red light, that means you're supposed to stop. Why do you need another sign that says, do not turn left on the red light? This is the most stupidest thing I've ever seen. And then they used to have a U-turn signal or a left turn signal, and they got rid of that with this line. So here in Albuquerque, like I said, they 5 turns car left the turn on left on the red. And then the other green light, they're halfway in the middle of the intersection honking and screaming, and they missed the last car turning a light left by like a foot. They're just barely making the way, and then the other cars are halfway in the middle of the street, and I'm thinking to myself, they don't do this in Phoenix, they don't do this in other states. This is the only thing that happens in New Mexico, Albuquerque.
So sometimes the no left on red might seem redundant, but sometimes I've seen it when approaching like a one-way street where you otherwise might have been able to make, a left on red like you would be able to make a right on red, and it explicitly is prohibited for whatever reason the state wants to justify that with. So sometimes it's redundant, sometimes it's not redundant. So that's all I can say to that. And again, if the U-turn, if not prohibited, is generally accepted that you can make one. And why cars enter the intersection? Well, it's so you don't miss the light, man. That's like the worst feeling in the world. Getting the first person to miss the light after everybody else in front of you gets through because someone way up in the line was slow and left too big of a gap. Yep. Screw that guy.
Yeah.
I'm taking mine.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the 5-car rule.
Well, here's what I'm not a fan of. I have a very big pet peeve against biker gangs who hold the light.
Oh yeah, I hate that too.
For their whole crew to go through.
Yeah.
Like you'll miss the light 2 or 3 times. Go we got 100 people on this ride. We all got to make this light together because we can't go on without our friends.
I've seen them hold up an entire 2-lane highway, not even at a light. Just stop the entire highway so that a bunch of them can go into a parking lot or something. It's pretty annoying.
Those people, I'm okay eliminating from society.
Well, I can't believe where's the police if you need them? Could you take videos of them and then turn them in later of what they're doing?
You absolutely could, but I don't take the time to do that because I don't want any more interactions with the police.
Yep.
Well, you know what?
And I would only call that a good idea if there was actual property harm.
Well, the property harm is theft of my time. Right?
No,
they basically kidnapped me at the light. I'm not allowed to proceed lawfully because of their actions.
Right. I'm saying if violating the traffic's rules there
I got you.
resulted in harm to somebody or their property, then
I understand what you're saying.
Maybe you want to report that.
But my
still
liberties
wouldn't.
have been infringed.
Right.
They violated my rights.
Now, I look at traffic lights as suggestions. If nobody's around, and I don't care what color that thing is, I'm going, man.
That's fine if you're not infringing. Like that's similar to their philosophy, except that they hold up other people. Like if you run a red light and there's nobody around and you're not infringing on the rights of anybody else, fine. I've done it.
Oh.
But they actively infringe on the liberties of everyone involved by taking advantage of that situation.
You're saying when the 5-car rule happens, if you're in the, if you got the green light and people are still 5-car rolling in front of you, they're wasting your time.
It's an infringement on my liberties. I'm not allowed to travel lawfully because they're there.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that sign says "Do not turn left on the red."
Yes, we've covered this.
Do you think that's gonna people in this dumb town were really gonna read? They probably are illiterate can't read in the first place.
Yeah.
But they were to read it. What sense would it make to people that are turning left on the red?
I agree that the sign is redundant, Sarah.
Yeah, and I agree that people don't get it, and they just look at the sign and they say, "I've never seen a sign like that before," and they just do what they used to do.
But there are certain intersections on my drive to work that are it's expressly prohibited to make a right on red, which is generally accepted without that sign. Like right on red is allowed, except when prohibited. So the left on red is redundant unless it would be generally prohibited in another instance, usually involving a one-way street. Because if you're turning left from a one-way to a one-way, you can make a left on red in most cases.
Well, it would be redundant, but this is Albuquerque. Doesn't matter if they get a red. There's 5 cars that's gonna turn us. That's why they put that sign up there, and nobody's gonna pay attention, and they're gonna keep turning 5 red light signals. And the whole thing is, how is that sign supposed to keep changing anybody's behavior?
It's not.
That's just peculiar.
It's not.
I mean,
yeah, it won't work. I think it would be funny if somebody in Albuquerque went and just disabled every single traffic light overnight and to see how traffic flowed the next day.
You know what's so I don't know what the rule is here, but where I come from, if the lights are out at the intersection, it's supposed to be treated like a stop sign.
Yeah, like a 4-way stop.
Like a 4-way stop.
Or a 3-way or whatever.
Whatever it is.
Yeah. Yep.
And at least in Manchester, New Hampshire, when the lights are out, it's a free-for-all.
It really is. And it seems like the route that has the heavier traffic will just kind of bully their way through. And that one goes in the side that's like, the less dominant traffic lane.
Yep.
They just got to find a way in.
Right. And that could be like inching ever so closer to the car until someone goes like, I better stop. I'm going to cause an accident here.
Yeah.
And they would be in the wrong if it's supposed to be treated like a stop sign.
Yeah. And when that happens, people don't get stuck on the road all day. They still make it to where they're going magically.
Yes. Magically, but still frustrating if you're on the less dominant side and people are not abiding by the agreed upon rules or societal norms for that area.
Can be frustrating because it's a sudden change. But I bet if that light never came back on, people would figure it out real quick. And when they came up to that light, they'd know what the deal is and things would probably flow faster than with the light working.
Yeah. I get stuck at a lot of lights where there's no cross flow traffic.
Yeah.
That most people would just stop and go through.
And it seems to me like they time a lot of the city lights just to be maximum frustration. so that if you accelerate basically without destroying your car pretty fast up to 5 over the speed limit, which is what most people drive, then you're going to get to that light almost in time to make it.
Yep.
But it's going to shut you down.
Yep. So you got to go 10 over and risk getting pulled over to make the lights.
Yep. Anything they can do to increase your cortisol levels.
I feel like depending on the time I leave my apartment in the morning, I either make more lights or miss them all. Like if I walk out my door 2 minutes early, the lights line up and I get to work like 5 minutes faster.
I had that going on in Salt Lake where there was like a 10-minute window where if I left within it, I'd hit every single green light for a series of like 15 green lights going down Redwood Road, which is like a really long road. And if it was before that or after that, no, I'd hit like almost every red light. But right in that window is green lights the whole way.
There's no way for me to get to work like right on time. Because if I leave a little bit late, I miss lights, and I don't get to, I get to work later than I need to.
Yeah.
And if I leave early, I get to work well earlier than I need to. It's just the way it plays out, man.
Yeah.
Okay. It was nice to talk with you. I'm glad. But anyway, did I tell you that New Mexico drivers were ranked the worst drivers in America by data? The insurance companies keep track of every time there's a wreck. And they figure out who did what and what speed were involved.
Yeah.
And I guess they calculate by per capita how many accidents per population. We were ranked the worst drivers in America. We got the cake. So
I believe it. I spent some time there. It was a while ago, but the drivers were certainly very bad then too.
I believe it, but I will also say that having taken an environmental economics class in college, one of the only things that stuck with me from that class is statistically there's a worst for everything. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. Like no matter, if they're tracking the data, there's going to be a town that has the worst drivers statistically. You can't get away from it.
Yep.
But how bad it is, like realistically, who knows? That's subjective.
I would place a guess that New Mexico is not that much worse than the next bad driver town.
But there has to be a worst if you're tracking the data. It doesn't mean it's all that important.
Well, one of the Commissioner Oliva said that you're putting all these speeding cameras at the poverty, low income part of the county. Well, that's kind of discrimination. And then they said that, they found that this is where the high fatality speed accidents happen. They're putting it not because they're broke and poor. They're putting them because that's where they have the most accidents, high speeding.
Yep.
And so, the
lower socioeconomic demographics tends to lead to more risky behavior overall.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so I think the lower the poorer you are, the dumber you are, the less educated you are, and then that's why you got less money, and then you would do dumb, stupid things.
Yep.
That was my conclusion.
That's a fair conclusion, and that's what leads to their decision making.
It's not always about intelligence. You get put into a place of desperation, and your critical thinking skills kind of go out the window. So
But either way, you're not going to find that in like the affluent neighborhood.
Right. Yeah, but right. I guess what I mean by it being a matter of stress and whatever, it might make sense to you to go 20 miles an hour over the speed limit on your way to work to try to make it on time because you're going to lose your job if you don't. If you're financially pinched.
Sure.
As opposed to
irresponsible enough to not leave early enough to get there on time.
And that, yes.
I used to get to work like an hour before I started and then take a nap in my car just to make sure that I beat all the traffic to get to work. So I would never be in that situation.
So-called better neighborhood, the more wealthier neighborhood, it's like they expect better behavior of you to be driving around in that neighborhood.
And they're generally correct.
Right. They're not going to tolerate dope dealers or vagrants or any kind of bad and terrible, ugly things in the neighborhood, and they will not tolerate speeders either. It's the same mentality. You are expected to behave better in that kind of neighborhood. In a poor neighborhood, anything goes.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And I think we've already established why we think that might be.
Right, but that was interesting. And then he thought that they're just putting them up to extort money out of people that don't have money. That is not the real reason.
But that is a consequence. Right?
Having a low mentality, low class of life mentality that leads to reckless, high speed behavior. There you go.
It's a poverty trap. It exists in multiple forms throughout society. Yours is just one example.
Yeah, whether unintentional or intentional, these things proliferate quite abundantly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for talking with me. Bye bye.
Yeah. Thanks for the call, Sarah. We've got another caller on the line. Unscreened caller. You're on Free Talk Live. Hello, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
It's a little quiet, but go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, is that better?
Yes.
All right. Well, I hate to change the subject, but...
That's what the show is about, sir.
Yeah. Some things have been bothering me lately, like, well, President Trump's in office, and he's surrounded himself with all these Israeli firsters. I mean, I don't understand why you would do that.
Because AIPAC donates a lot of money to the campaigns, and if you don't do what they want, they will either fund your challenger or defund you.
Okay. But do you guys know anything about the Jewish Talmud?
I do not.
A little bit.
Okay. Or how about Chabad Leibowitz, the cult that kind of controls Israel at the moment? Netanyahu is part of that.
The Chabad? Just vaguely familiar.
Why don't you fill us in to what you're driving at? Because I'm sure, just like me, there are other listeners out there who could use a crash course in this.
Well, you could go, like David Icke has a good thing on the Sabbatean Frankist, which was a cult within Judaism that kind of took it over back several hundred years ago in the 1700s, and they came up with there was like a big search for a Messiah back then. The world was really changing, and so this guy, first it was I can't remember his first name. Frank was his last name, but he kind of took over, and he was saying that you can gain salvation by being bad, like inversion of what we think of as like if you're gonna be a good person, then you're gonna be go to heaven or whatever. But these guys said that their Messiah is going to come, and if as bad as we can go, they had like sex orgies all the time. They're with their sisters, and it's just really gross. And they this was the Ottoman Empire that was existing then, and they didn't like it when this guy shows up with like almost 1 million followers and was preaching stuff like that. So they made him convert. And that's where we have, like in Turkey now, that, those people that converted. And, they're in all religions, but basically, like, you look at what's happening in Ukraine, they're all like, like Victoria Nuland, you know who she was, Assistant Secretary of State, who was caught on a live mic saying that they spent $5 billion of U.S. aid money to overthrow the duly elected government of Ukraine.
Back in 2014.
Yeah, and and she's she was still around and in a capacity with the State Department. Then you had Anthony Blinken, who's see, these are all like, well, I don't call them Jewish. I call them like fake Jewish, because Jewish people that I know don't think like that I know of. And I've had professors that talked about this in college years ago, and it just kind of stuck with me and followed it. And I don't know if you're aware that George Soros, he's got a big compound in Hungary, and his archives are located in the Blinken building. So Blinken, George Soros, and you must have heard recently that the Doge guys found out that we paid George Soros hundreds of millions of dollars, and this guy was part of paying all these people coming up from Central America and wherever to flood our country, illegally. You've got Trump, he was like, his kids are married to these people. His son-in-law, Jared Kushner, was the head of Chabad in Yale.
Okay.
You know, it's like they're all part of this cult that look like, if you look at the Jewish Talmud, you know, they said, like, here's some quotes. Even the best of Goyim, which is what we are, anybody that isn't in their tribe, anyway, we're Goyim. We should all be killed. All children of Goyim are animals. They're beasts. A Jew may violate but not marry a non-Jew girl. A Jew may have sex with a child as long as the child is less than 9 years old. I mean, this is in their writings, you know.
So don't be Jewish and protect your kids.
See, their life doesn't mean anything to these people. No wonder we're caught in. Well, Zelensky, he's one, you know, and here he was, an actor, you know, got famous playing the piano with his penis. I don't know if you ever saw that skit that he did. What a character! But you know, and then we think like,
I'm glad I
look at like. Russia and Ukraine, they're killing each other. They're both Christians, and not only that, they're really all Russians. Now, who's responsible for this? Some people would think, oh well, Putin's, you know, kind of a good guy. Well, I saw an interview with David Gergen. I don't know if you know who he is, ex-politician and stuff. But anyway, he did an interview with Klaus Schwab, and you can see this on YouTube. Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum, and by the way, that was started by Henry Kissinger. Klaus Schwab was his top student. Well, anyway, he's bragging about how they've taken over governments all around the world, and he's talking about Putin. See, he had a school.
So I'm gonna pause you there because I'm gonna interject here. I think I understand that you think there is a Jewish problem, and I will say two things to that. Number one, like as I just said, don't be Jewish and protect your kids and your family from whatever encroachment they may have, right? And then secondary to that, this is another example of if you eliminate the function of government and the apparatus of government, then they have nothing to take over. Right. The only way they're able to encroach is through the government apparatus, not the church apparatus, because they can't convert anybody that's not willing to be converted to Judaism. And for the most part, they don't want them.
No, it's not Judaism. It's definitely not Judaism. Like I said, I know I've had friends my whole life that have been Jewish, professors that took me under his wing.
But every name you've listed that you may have a problem with, the only reason they're a problem is their connection to the government apparatus and the state. Otherwise, they can't do anything.
Oh, well, they control the money, right? Rothschild set up the private central bank scheme, of which we're part of.
Yes, and the only reason that's a thing, again, is because the competing currencies don't exist outside of like crypto and goldbacks and aren't commonly circulated. But there's absolutely you can compete against that.
Outside of government.
What's that?
You don't think they have any power outside of government?
No, I don't.
No, I tend to agree that government causes that problem. We can hold you over if you want to continue this conversation. Also, give us a call, 603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live.
Join liberty-minded voluntarists, anarchists, and libertarians from June 13th through the 16th for the 8th annual Fork Fest at Rogers Campground in the beautiful White Mountains of New Hampshire. Fork Fest is a fork of the Porcupine Freedom Festival, which has sold out in recent years. Fork Fest happens the weekend before the Porcupine Freedom Festival. Fork Fest is decentralized, which means that there's no ticket cost and no one is in charge. All you have to do to join the fun is reserve your camping site, RV site, or motel room with Rogers Campground for June 13th through the 16th. You can find out more at the unofficial website, forkfest.party. You can also connect with other attendees on the Forkfest Telegram and Matrix chat rooms, as well as the Forkfest forum. You can find links to those at forkfest.party. We hope to see you there June 13th through the 16th. Forkfest.party.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer with a look back at some of the week's top stories. Hundreds of people were killed in Israeli airstrikes in Gaza after the collapse of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Tel Aviv says it's carrying out the strikes because Hamas rejected proposals to extend the ceasefire agreement. Hamas called the attacks a blatant violation of all international and humanitarian conventions. FSN's Giles Gibson has more from Tel Aviv.
The Israeli military has carried out some airstrikes inside Gaza since the expiry of the first phase of the ceasefire agreement. But really, these strikes that started in the early hours of Tuesday local time were on a completely different scale. International aid workers have described being woken up by loud explosions which shook the buildings that they were in. And then as dawn broke, hundreds of people started turning up at hospitals inside Gaza, the remaining healthcare facilities inside the enclave. There are lots of photos and videos circulating of large crowds outside the entrances to those hospitals. And we've also heard from the Palestinian Red Crescent saying that hospitals inside Gaza are overwhelmed.
U.S. President Donald Trump says his call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was very good and that peace talks are on track. The pair spoke a day after Trump talked with Russian President Vladimir Putin, who said he would be willing to pause attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Within hours of that call, both sides launched fresh strikes, accusing each other of targeting oil facilities and power plants. FSN's Kate Fisher reports from Washington.
Donald Trump taking a very different tone than after the last time these two leaders spoke, which was, of course, during that angry Oval Office meeting here in Washington last month. Donald Trump saying that most of the conversation was based on the call he had with Vladimir Putin yesterday in order to align both Russia and Ukraine in terms of their requests and needs. And he said, we are very much on track. So certainly Donald Trump suggesting that things are still going well, despite the fact that Volodymyr Zelensky was concerned after the readouts from that call between Putin and Trump.
London's Heathrow Airport was closed all day on Friday after a fire at a nearby electricity substation that provides it with power. Heathrow is Europe's busiest airport, and hundreds of thousands of passengers have been affected, with disruption set to continue for days to come. And the World Meteorological Organization released its latest state of the global climate on Wednesday, confirming that 2024 was the hottest year on record in 175 years. From Bureaus Worldwide, this
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
This is Free Talk Live. Give us a call. Let us know what you're thinking about tonight. The phone number to the studio is 603-283-6160. In the studio tonight, it's Stu.
And Richie Rich.
And we've got a caller on the line that we were talking to previously. Caller, are you still there?
Yeah.
So you were saying that you think there's a Zionist problem? Is this correct?
Well, I think it's even further, deeper than that. I think there's a cult. Zionism is part of it, of course, but other people got sucked into that. But this cult thinks that by doing bad, by killing people and all that, I mean, they love it. They just absolutely love it. It's like blood sacrifices. They get off on it. But, like the World Economic Forum has trained, according to their leader, Klaus Schwab, over 4,000 people. I call them their agents. And they put them in governments all around the world and in top positions like in health and stuff. And that's why
they call them young global leaders. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
The problem is still that they're putting them into the government apparatus. Without that, there's no legitimacy and no power and no control.
Right. That's the mechanism by which they're able to do things that you don't like them doing.
Yeah, well, he was bragging about, like, take Canada, for instance. Not only did he put Trudeau in, but at least half of his cabinet are all global leaders. He even bragged about Putin being a young global leader. So they trained all these people to go in lockstep, like when this the COVID thing happened. How come all these governments around the world, just made everything the way it was here?
Right. The solution remains the same. Eliminate the apparatus by which they control others, and the problem is generally solved.
Mm-hmm.
They will try to do it another way, but they don't have the legitimacy that the state does.
Well, they control the medical fields, the CDC.
How do you think they control the medical field, man?
Where does the medical field get the power to do what they do?
Into that.
The medical field is limited by restrictions placed upon it by the government.
Oh, is that why we were all given death shot?
I was not given a death shot.
Well, good thing you weren't, and I didn't let my kids either.
Okay.
But,
yeah, they told me too, but I said no way.
So many people that are dead or have developed heart conditions, and now they're finding that all these impurities were in the shot. I mean, they've been studying it now for a while. Why are people dying? Turbo cancer, everything. And the heads of all these groups are of that tribe.
Say it. Call them Jews. Just say it. Don't be afraid to say it. If that's what you believe, say it.
I'm not saying that because, like I said, there's a cult, just like the Christians. Oh my God, they believe in rapture, which is all like 100 and some years old. That was stuck in the study Bible that all these young preachers.
And until the Christians take over the government, they have no power over me or you or anybody else. They can't do it. They can't do it with the church alone.
You look at State Street, Vanguard, and BlackRock. Well, who heads them? They own everything. They own all the food products with all the poisons. You see, they want to kill us. They want to eliminate billions of people off this earth, and then they promise their followers, their
point made,
radical followers.
And I've already given you the solution.
Yeah.
For whatever example you want to bring up next. No government. That's the only place they derive the power.
Then how are things going to work? We're going to go to gangs and tribes or just religions like in the old days?
I'm fine with religions because they can't impose their views on me, and gangs don't have the legitimacy you can defend against them. We covered this with the last caller.
Oh,
yeah.
Listen to the show.
And gangs generally hold themselves to some moral code.
What was the question?
Weren't there religious wars or not?
Yes.
Well, then, what are you saying?
I'm saying that those religions were the governments of the time.
We still have religions, right? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying those religions were the governments of the time, and at least here in America, we don't have a theocracy, and the Catholic Church, the Jewish synagogues, the Muslim mosques can't impose their views on me, and if they try and I defend myself against them, I have the legitimacy to do so.
Yep.
See, that sounds like theory. It sounds like a great theory.
It's not a theory. The church can't do anything to me. The church can't bring me to the church can't bring me before their tribal leader and say that I've committed some sin against their church because I'm not a part of the church.
They could.
They can't. Not here, not now. In the past, they may have. But they can't anymore.
They can say and do whatever they want, but they can't impose anything upon you.
Again.
What's that?
In the future, if you do away with governments, then they're going to do that again. They're going to find some way of controlling.
No, because I'm surrounded by a group of armed individuals that will resist that wholeheartedly.
Yep. Thanks for the call. That really is what it is, though. It's the problem there is illegitimate authority, and if you don't give illegitimate authority power, then they don't do these things to you.
But if you give illegitimate authority power, they will legitimize themselves, and then it's hard to take that back.
Yep. We're going to go to another caller. We've got, I believe, Robert. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. How you guys doing tonight?
Good. How are you?
Hanging in there. I'm from a different cult. It's called astrology.
Oh. Sun signs and moon signs.
Yeah, stuff like that. Did you guys see the super blood worm moon last month?
No, it was like 3:00 in the morning and I was asleep. I thought it was like last week or the week before that. It wasn't last month. It wasn't that long ago.
That must have been
on
pretty cool.
13.
Did anybody get any cool video of it? Or
Yeah, I went out to see it, and it was cloudy, so I had to watch it on TV. But it was pretty cool. And the reason it's a super blood moon is because the super means that the moon was at perigee, which means the moon looked about 15% larger than it normally does.
Nice.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I don't usually, when we had the eclipse, I went out and I looked at it for 20 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I've seen it. Like, I don't need to stand out here very long.
Mhm.
And the blood moon, again, was like 3 o'clock in the morning here when it was within our viewing area. And I'm like, I'm not going to get up for this.
Yeah.
Yeah, most people didn't. They did have it on TV, though.
Yep.
But I just wanted to mention that. Wanted to change the cult.
Yeah, that's fine. You know, if the problem with the astrology people, again, is like me and my sister are like both Pisces. So you would think like, oh, everything applies, but we're like opposite in almost every way, shape, or form.
Well,
we're completely opposite human beings. They go like, well, you guys got a different sun sign, right? You guys are both Pisces, but like she's a different birth, and there's always an excuse as to why individuals are individuals.
I think a lot of these
doesn't
excuses is because they've been given a false version of what it is. I think there's some relevance in this, and that's why the White House always has astrologers.
Okay.
I think there's some some lesser known secrets about all of that.
I just like the meme where the son's asking his mom, "Hey mom, what time was I born?" And mom goes, "Stay away from her."
Yeah, but as far as pulling the zodiac off the grocery store shelf and expecting that to have some relevance in your life, probably not. Is that all you had, Robert?
Yeah, that's all I got for tonight, guys.
All
you
right.
guys have a good evening.
Yeah, thanks for the call. We're going to go next to Tim in Florida. Are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah. What's on your mind?
So, the Old Testament, and I've been listening to the LibriVox King James version of the Old Testament, and so far I've made it all the way through Proverbs, and I've made some observations, and I'm thinking of the Old Testament versus libertarianism because, of course, in classic liberalism and libertarianism, you have the concept of the individual and individual rights. Basically that, if a person is guilty of something, it doesn't mean his father or his son or his wife is going to be punished, right? And there actually is a concept in the Old Testament like that, but it runs counter to everything else in the Old Testament because
unsurprising, there are contradictions in the Bible.
Yeah, and my observation is the norm in the Old Testament is kind of like the Hatfields and the McCoys, where it's basically the sins of the fathers carry on, or think of an Italian vendetta, anything like that. But then there is a scripture that says, and it is repeated several times throughout the Old Testament, that the iniquity of the father shall not rest on the son, meaning that each one will be held to his own account. But it really runs counter to like the whole theme, and it seems like now we got a lot of LARPing, but I can't even really call it LARPing because it's just.
I know what LARPing is, live action role playing, for those who don't know the acronym. But what do you're suggesting that there are people out there LARPing as religious people, or what's
everything? People are getting excited to revive all of the past problems and conflicts, and just in general, and it's really disheartening.
Okay. And so these LARPers, like, what have you observed them doing, and what's the problem?
Well, basically, when you have any particular ideological group become a majority within a national government, and of course, to some extent, the platform of the national government is the problem. but also it's how it's
been
used.
like the theme of the night.
Sure has.
What's the problem? They're getting involved in the government. What's the solution? Get rid of the apparatus from which they can get involved and create all this havoc.
It's also, it's also the way the government is used, and is it individual
always for
rights,
nefarious purposes,
or is it group rights? And that's my theme of the night: is individual rights versus the sins of the father. In other words, your whole tribe, your whole nation is doomed because of what a handful of people did, and now they represent all of you.
Sure.
That's collectivism, I guess, is the word I was looking
for.
And
if you believe the concept of rights, there are only individual rights.
Correct. And that's where all this LARPing, the people that are LARPing right now, they're LARPing as collectivists mostly. And,
and running the state apparatus from which they can control the lives of others who don't wish to participate.
Yep. And now we've got AI bombs and total control. The new satellite network. What's the dude's name?
Elon Musk and Starlink.
Yes. You can't hide all that good fun stuff.
Mm-hmm. Interesting point about Elon Musk. His mother's father was part of a big technocracy movement in South Africa. Technocracy is ruled by technocrats or technicians, for anybody who doesn't know. Ruled by technicians. So that'd be like, the lab coats get to make the rules.
The smartest people, like the other caller wanted.
Yeah,
all the smart
Fauci's.
people with,
Yep.
With the smart people with the good ideas running things.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And I think his father actually named Elon after a book. And it had something to do with going to Mars. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's a weird thing.
It was written. It was written by it was either like a Nazi propagandist or I don't know, just something like that. Anyway,
I guess his father was a really bad guy. Anyways, do you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
Running a slave emerald mine in South Africa? A good guy?
Actually, I do have one very important thing to talk about.
Go ahead.
So the archives on torrent, the first and second season, nobody is seeding them. And I would just invite anybody that listens that really appreciates the show, if you want to listen to some good stuff, download the first and second season using a torrent, a torrent client, but also share them because
you're not going to get in trouble with your service provider because Free Talk Live doesn't do IP takedowns.
Yeah, it's totally legit.
So right, seed it to at least 1 or 2 or 300% there.
Have a good night.
You as well.
Thanks for the call. Next, we're going to go to... Whoops.
Oh, hung up
Sorry
on that guy.
About that. You can call back if you'd like, David. I hit the wrong button. In the meantime...
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
No, I swear, honestly, that was a mistake. Looks like he made it back in time.
We'll go to the next guy anyway. We always talk
David
to
in New Mexico. Go ahead. What do you have for us tonight?
What happened there? Who was operating the switchboard there?
That was me. I just hit the wrong button.
It's a Russian agent.
You still got in next. What do you got for us, David?
Cool. So, a number of things. First of all, so based on what you just said recently, Richie, are there no evil geniuses that we need to worry about?
Evil geniuses? Only if they control the government, or only if they operate within the government structure.
Oh, good. Well, there's no possibility that an evil genius could ever get into our government, right?
No, they could. That's the problem. But if you eliminate the apparatus, the means by which they use their genius to control others, it's virtually eliminated.
Oh, by what do you mean? How do you do that? What do you mean by that?
Which part? I said it. If you if you get rid of the government apparatus.
This way, I get your gist, but I didn't understand the specifics of what you're trying to communicate. So try it again.
In the government, abolish the state, abolish the government apparatus, fire everybody, shut down all the agents, close the office of the presidency.
Dr. Doofenshmirtz has a real hard time carrying out his evil plans unless he can hijack the government to make it happen.
Okay,
and then do that from the federal level to the state level to the city level to the county level to the local level, right? get rid of it all.
I'm not. Now I understand you, and I'm not necessarily opposed to that. But I got a but and a what if. So if you do that, then what happens?
What do you mean then what happens? Then people are free to enter into contracts voluntarily to go where they want, how they want, as long as they don't infringe on the liberties and rights of others.
Okay, and so you guys are over there doing that, and then a couple hundred miles away from you, I'm over here with all my evil buddies, and we get together about 10,000, maybe 20,000 guys that are all armed like special forces, and we see what you got going on over there, and we're just going to come and take it.
Why would you do that?
Yeah, why would you do that?
Well, because we're evil. I already told you that.
Well, you're going to have a really hard time.
Yeah.
okay,
Because again, what you're reducing it to is armed conflict.
And I'll go ahead and cite how hard was it for Russia to destroy Afghanistan in the 1980s? Almost impossible. What, the gun behind every blade of grass thing
from the Japanese. Yeah.
It's extremely hard to conquer a territory.
How many Afghanis died in that?
Oh, I don't know, probably a whole bunch.
Yeah. So how many New Hampshireites would die in that?
As many as are necessary to repel your threat. Or as many that want to assist in repelling your threat.
Death is not the worst of evils.
So you got New Hampshire guys that want to repel, and let's say that since Canada is communist and they're like right on your border, like literally, and they do things with Chinese troops, like because they do. Like 10,000 of them in the north probably, and they just say, hey, here's an opportunity. Why don't you go invade America through New Hampshire? They got this thing going on. And the Chinese go,
yes.
And they do it.
Your hypothetical threat is there, and then it will be repelled as best as we can with the arms that we have at our disposal. And as Stu said, death is not the worst of evils. But it always goes back to like the motivation behind it, right? If we as a free society are peacefully trading with Canada and China and Vermont and Maine
they're gonna
and
get
Massachusetts,
more out of trading with us than they are out of killing us.
What's the motivation to do the invasion and take over the resources?
Okay, I can respond to that. So like over in Africa, like a couple weeks ago, happens all the time over in Africa, when the Muslims came to town and then chopped the heads off of a whole bunch of people because they were Christian.
Yes.
They weren't interested in trading. They
Understood.
weren't interested in,
Understood. And yet, again, if they tried that here, they will face armed opposition. And what they probably want to do is survive as well. There's like a biological imperative to survive.
Man, 72 virgins, man.
Fine.
Then
we will give them a shortcut to their wishes.
Okay, so it's okay to fight back. Okay, I take that away. And then, but how are you so sure that you will prevail?
I'm not, but the fight is worth having.
Yeah, what's your point? That might make right, or what are you getting at?
There's a whole bunch of points actually that I've been making, and there's a whole bunch more to be made. That's one of them. Yeah, that Mike makes right is a real thing.
Well, it doesn't make it right, but it makes it so.
Yeah.
And so the idea is to win and prevail in the armed conflict.
It makes it right. Wait a minute. It makes it right to the people that believe that it makes it right, that come at you with
the winners write the history books.
Like Attila the Hun, like with several 100,000.
Yes, the winners write the history books.
You keep talking over me, so I never get to finish my sentence.
Well, because you drag your point on, and I already understand your point.
Well,
we're short on time.
Dragging it on, so it's you making, sua sponte, making a decision as to what everybody should be.
I'm not making a decision for anybody. I'm saying that
when you interrupt people, you're making a decision that they're done talking.
Well, yeah, because again, you drag on. You've made your point. We're short on time.
Is king. So this is exactly what we would get in Richie's society.
No,
Richie the tyrant.
No, Stu's buttons. Stu's buttons, and he says you're done talking, David. We have another caller on the line that I'd like to get to. Wireless caller, unscreened. You're on Free Talk Live.
Hey, guys, I just wanted to call and tell you that you've done a really good job tonight.
Thank you.
You're
welcome.
You've got all sorts of authoritarians calling in.
That's
and
what
you
we
guys
like.
are just-
They're the easiest to rebut.
Yeah, the show's no fun when we all agree.
Well, you guys have done a really good job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And that's really all I had to say.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for the call.
I'm not going to get into this story, but I would like to, we went this whole show, and you might get the idea that throughout this show and from hearing me speak, that I don't like politicians, I don't like the government, and I don't agree with those people most of the time. But I'm just going to throw out this headline because it's maybe one of the few times where I may agree with what a politician has to say or the ideas that they're holding in their heart of hearts.
Oh, sure. Come on. Let's hear it then.
Russian women should wear miniskirts to boost demographics, says their local politician.
Yeah, I could see some people having a hard time arguing with that.
Right?
I don't think I'm ready to jump into the there ought to be a law category, though.
I don't know if there ought to be a law. It's just birth rate's down. What do we do to boost it? And there was an opposition story
talking about mandating miniskirts.
No, I don't know about mandating. Said they should wear, hey, ladies,
or a Freedom Torches getting women to smoke kind of a
Edward
Bernays campaign thing.
There was an opposition story several months ago in Japan where they said all males should be given a vasectomy after the age of 30 to compel them to procreate earlier in their lifespan. I go well, that's invasive.
Yeah, it is.
Right? But hey, ladies, put on a miniskirt. Let's entice these males to procreate so we can boost demographics.
Yeah, that might work. I know if you're Japan, you're pretty worried right now about your replacement rate. So
I'm pro miniskirt. Is what I'm saying.
Miniskirts might actually help with that. The story I had that I didn't get into was about Border Patrol taking more eggs than fentanyl at the Canadian border this year. So, I don't know. I guess eggs will just continue to get more expensive. Thanks, CPB. If you didn't get your call in tonight, you can call us next weekend. We'll be here Saturday and Sunday. This is Free Talk Live.
We have some good news. The indictments against Ross Ulbricht in the District of Maryland were dismissed with prejudice, meaning they can never be refiled. This is especially good because those indictments contain the only charge ever made that Ross engaged in murder for hire. This was a serious allegation that Ross Ulbricht denies. It was never prosecuted or ruled on by a jury, but was trumpeted by the federal government and the media as if it were proven fact. The Maryland court held these indictments for almost 5 years, poisoning Ross's case and leaving him under a cloud of unproven allegations. As explained in Ross's appeal to the Supreme Court, the fact that the judge used these allegations to give Ross a draconian sentence of double life without parole violated his Sixth Amendment right to a jury trial. Judges are required to issue sentences based on convictions decided by a jury, not unproven allegations never even charged at trial. Although this is a positive development, the dropped indictment will not set Ross free. Now, a presidential pardon is Ross's only hope of freedom. Sign the petition at freeross.org. freeross.org.
How many lawyers does it take to change a light bulb? None. They'd rather keep their clients in the dark. There are too many lawyer jokes to count. However, there are some lawyers with more noble intentions. At the Institute for Justice, we